Number 10. Blue Marvel. Marvel has several powerhouse characters who are effectively its answers to Superman, and one of those heroes is Hyperion. Ever since the first incarnation of the character debuted in Avengers number 69, Hyperion has been one of the most powerful figures in the Marvel multiverse in all of his forms. But none of those forms have been as destructive or dangerous as King Hyperion, a reality-traveling threat who destroyed entire worlds and their most powerful heroes before making his way into the main Marvel universe. But King Hyperion didn't stand a hope in hell against the Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel Adam Brashear is one of the best Marvel superheroes, one of my favorites and one of the absolutely undefeatable. He's taken on all the Avengers' entire alien armadas, he has lifted a meteor the size of Arkansas and guided it away, and he's uppercutted the hell out of the Ultimate Universe Hulk. Hyperion says he's defeated Blue Marvels before, but he hasn't faced Earth 616's. While he put Blue Marvel down initially, when Hyperion threatened the innocent bystanders nearby, Blue Marvel found a new strength. Letting loose in a way he hadn't before, it took 5 blows before Hyperion was out cold and Blue Marvel stood over him victorious. Number 9. Thor and Hyperion. With the end of the multiverse staring down the heroes of the 616 Marvel Universe across the Jonathan Hickman run on Avengers and New Avengers, Thor and a handful of other heroes like Hyperion, Starbrand, Nightmask, Ex Nihilo, and Abyss ventured across the multiverse to confront the Beyonders, responsible for the collapse of the Marvel multiverse. Now, wielding the Hammer of Thor, that's with 2 R's, which can only be used by those that are considered unworthy, Thor went into battle alongside the others, giving everything he had and helping bring down just 2 of the Beyonders at the cost of his arm in New Avengers number 32. Now, after facing just 2 of the Beyonders, only Thor and Hyperion survived the battle. Unfortunately, that battle ended just for another to begin as an entire army of Beyonders descended upon them. In one of the most badass moments in Marvel Comics, realizing that Thor can no longer wield Thor with 2 R's hammer because he has proven himself worthy once again, Thor and Hyperion laugh together and race each other to Valhalla as they throw themselves into this one final battle against an enemy that they have no hope of defeating. Number 8. Monica Rambeau. Monica Rambeau is an insanely powerful cosmic hero, and being one of the heroes to hold the title of Captain Marvel, we would expect no less. Way back in Avengers number 248, a battle was taking place between the Avengers and various Olympians. One of the main fights taking place was between Zeus, a sky father on par with Odin himself, and the god of thunder himself, Thor. Now, to be quite frank, Zeus thrashed Thor like he was a badly behaved little boy. Zeus had Thor down and is about to literally wipe him from this plane of existence when out of nowhere, Monica Rambeau shows up. Shooting Zeus with a little blast of energy that cuts his arm, she orders him to back off of Thor or she will do much worse. Now, Zeus, obviously not seeing her as a threat, fires off a lightning bolt that simply phases right through her living light body, doing absolutely nothing to her. So, in retaliation, she tells him the gloves are off and flies in, hitting Zeus with a blast that lights up the entirety of Olympus. And while Zeus was not defeated, Thor makes note of the fact that Monica hurt him more than any mortal had ever done before, and it shows. Number 7. Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer is easily one of the strongest of Marvel's cosmic heroes. He can do some absolutely insane things, and he has had some massively impressive fights. But one of the ones that I think shows just how powerful he is would be his first ever fight against Null, the symbiote god. At the start of 2018's Guardians of the Galaxy series by Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw, the Silver Surfer was swallowed in a black hole that transported him billions of years into the past, landing him in Silver Surfer Black. At the beginning of time, Silver Surfer faced Null in battle when the symbiote god was just beginning to rise in power, and it was one hell of a fight. Null proved to be an extremely difficult opponent, which we know he is from his fight against literally all of Earth's heroes. Silver Surfer was going to the extent of his power trying to defeat Null in combat, and Null is still getting the best of him using All Black the Necro Sword and his other symbiotes. With Surfer on the ropes facing off against the God of Darkness, he uses the last little bits of his power cosmic that he has to create an entirely new sun point blank in front of Null's creepy little face. While he knows it doesn't defeat Null permanently, it does defeat him for the time being, and it's just super awesome.
Number 6. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is a villain who might be well respected among Spider-Man fans, but on a greater scale, he's not likely someone you think of when you think of like a global level supervillain threat. When you think of someone who's, I don't know, unstoppable, who doesn't, hold back. Usually we think of him as being a little bit more reserved. But while he might not share the status of comic book villains like Doctor Doom, it doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to instill that level of fear among the superhero community. After all, when Doc Ock chose to stop holding back, and he did, when he lay on his deathbed, he was able to seemingly do something most villains have struggled for years to do: permanently defeat Spider-Man by tricking him into swapping bodies with him, which is pretty crazy. And then for a while we thought Spider-Man was literally gone, but he wasn't, because comics. Number 5. Upside Down Man. While not officially stated as such, the Upside Down Man is kind of godlike in his appearance in DC Comics. He is, I would say, the dark reflection of Hecate, who is quite dark herself, clearly, so that's saying something, as she is considered to be a goddess and powerful witch. So I think this means we can basically consider him to be at a god level or beyond, honestly, when he wants to be. And of course, Upside Down Man proved how brutal he could be when he chose to attack all of reality, threatening to devour the entire multiverse in Justice League Dark. Number 4. Chthon. For those who are not familiar, Chthon is often attached to Scarlet Witch in Marvel Comics, and is a demonic elder god, one of the oldest entities in the Marvel Universe. He is the one who is often believed to have granted Scarlet Witch her chaos magic abilities, and has been known from time to time to possess Wanda, as such, using her as his host. While Doctor Strange has faced and defeated Chthon before, there have been times when the villain has proven to be even too powerful for other super powerful magic users to handle, like Doctor Strange, and even, himself often a villain, Doctor Doom. At one point, Chthon threatened to bridge the gap between his realm and Earth, using the Darkhold as a kind of bridge. He assumed a physical form and threatened to basically conquer Earth. The only one who was able to stop him was Scarlet Witch, and even then, Wanda couldn't defeat him permanently, and instead kept him imprisoned within his own book, the Darkhold, which she keeps basically within herself, using the text in Chthon to basically bolster her own power. I'm sure nothing can go wrong with that, right? Number 3. Anti-Monitor. The Justice League has many powerful villains, but the Anti-Monitor is one of honestly the most terrifying. His control of the antimatter universe and the ability to threaten the multiverse make him an unstoppable force. During Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Anti-Monitor refused to hold back and caused massive, and I mean massive, destruction, as his determination to end everything terrified readers. Even after his defeat, the threat remained, as Necron held his body, taking it and actually repurposing it to be used as a power source for the Black Central Power Battery. I mean, Black Lanterns are not good, they are bad guys, but at the end of the day you have to admit at least they're good at recycling. Number 2. Enchantress. Oddly enough, despite both being very much tied to the world of magic over at Marvel Comics, Enchantress doesn't often get to face off against people like the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, which you would think she would because she's a very magical villain and he's a very magical hero. However, during the Acts of Vengeance crossover event, she did end up getting matched up for battle with him in his series Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme. In issue number 12, we see these two face off, and Enchantress, along with Executioner, proves to be actually too much even for Doctor Strange to handle, which might surprise you, but that's how it went. First of all, he is successfully seduced into attending a meeting with Amora the Enchantress in the evening, not even seemingly recognizing her as the Enchantress previous to her reveal. Then they begin to battle, and Enchantress and Executioner's Asgardian heritage makes them seemingly too much for Strange to handle. Fortunately, Clea shows up just in time to save his magic butt, but as with many other superhero battles against Enchantress, Strange honestly got lucky. I feel like a lot of people get lucky when they fight Enchantress because she is always a powerhouse and she often does not hold back, to be real with you. Number 1. Batman Who Laughs. Although he may currently be defeated in the comics, make no mistake that the Batman Who Laughs remains one of the most terrifying characters to come out of DC Comics' Dark Multiverse. I miss the Dark Multiverse. Batman Who Laughs hails from Earth -22 and is a version of Bruce Wayne who ended up being turned insane by exposure to the Joker venom. When Batman Who Laughs stops holding back, you honestly better watch out. Batman Who Laughs would serve Barbados, the Bat God, and later go on to ally himself with and later even betray, if you can believe it, Perpetua, revealing the whole time that he actually planned to conquer the multiverse himself, so he might shape it in his own image, becoming one of the most feared villains in all of DC's history. You know that you're a crazy villain when you're just like betraying villains like left and right and being like, oh, this was actually part of my plan the whole time, to go with you, betray you, and then take over the multiverse. That's crazy.
Alright, let's get something straight here. Bobby Drake is one of the most powerful superheroes, period. Because his power isn't over ice or cold, it's based on molecular motion. He has the power to influence the speed of molecules, thereby freezing or melting things. This power is obscenely powerful. It's been shown to prevent nuclear explosions. He created ice walls so thick and strong it contained the Hulk, with the thought he can freeze the molecules in a person and dissipate their body. He has the ability to block other mutants from accessing their powers, and in organic ice form you can destroy his body and he can still reform it, making him pretty much invincible. He can use the surrounding moisture to grow in size and gaining superhero strength in the process. Even though he's done all these things, he still hasn't tapped all of his potential, so guys, he's S tier, what can I say? At number 9 is the Sentry. Honestly, this dude should probably be at number 1, but what can I say? I'm a bit biased. The Sentry is a big shot in the Marvel world who packs a serious punch. He's matched up against the Hulk in a brawl and can shoot out energy blasts like nobody's business. Plus, he's got this mind mojo that could probably touch all minds around the globe, but here's the kicker. His mind is a mess. He's got this dark side called the Void that messes things up whenever he tries to do good. The more good he does, the worse the Void acts out to balance it. So he's actually scared to max out all of his abilities because he's afraid of what might happen in terms of his alter ego, the Void. Once his brain went haywire, and thanks to Norman Osborn's sneaky tricks, Sentry went berserk on Asgard, on all of Asgard, nearly taking it down on his ones. He even tore the Greek god of war Ares into 2 without breaking a sweat. It was only when he got a grip on his mind for a bit that he held the Void off, letting Thor finish the job. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing the notification bell. It helps get the video be seen to more people, and it's free, so why not? At number 8 is Dr. Fate. This dude wields crazy magical powers. Like, think magic on a whole nother level. This guy can do a bunch of stuff like casting spells, reading minds, moving things with his mind, telekinesis. Plus, everybody who's taken on the role of Dr. Fate can make themselves crazy strong and basically invincible. But their power isn't limited by some external force or lack of mojo. No, it's all about control. Dr. Fate's power is reigned by the person wearing the helmet, the host. Without the host, Fate is just powerless. The host's mind clashes with the source of this magic sometimes, Naboo, but if they don't agree on what to do, the host can slam the brakes on Fate's power trips. At number 7 is Doctor Strange. Despite being the mega sorcerer supreme dude, he has this thing where he's holding back a ton of power. Like, seriously, the guy's got magic mojo that could basically sort out all conflicts in a snap. In the big Civil War mess, the Watcher said Strange could have just blinked and ended the whole ordeal. But what does he do instead? Chilling in his quiet time, hoping everyone else would just, get along. After that, when he finally gets into action in the new Avengers crew, he's holding back his powers like crazy. But when he's forced to ramp it up and use the heavy duty stuff, especially against the Hulk, he totally messes the Hulk up. However, diving into these dark magic vibes costs him big time. He eventually would come to lose his title as the Sorcerer Supreme because he went too deep into the dark side of magic. That's where all the power is, though.
Number 6, Superman. In Superman number 127, we are introduced to Titano the Super Ape. Now, he started off as a smart ape named Toto that was sent into space, but then was accidentally exposed to radiation from 2 colliding meteors. Now this, for some reason, grew Toto into a massive King Kong style ape who is now named Titano, and it also gave Titano the ability to fire rays of green kryptonite out of his eyes. I don't know. Obviously, that is a big problem for Superman, who couldn't really get in close to this super cryptovision ape. But luckily, Superman's girlfriend is able to trick Titano into wearing lead sunglasses that stop the kryptonite rays, at which point Superman just picked up the giant super ape and threw him back through time. Superman chucked his super monkey through time back to the prehistoric era where he could interact with dinosaurs. Yes, Superman is so strong that he can literally throw things through time. He's also thrown Jimmy Olsen through time before, but who cares? This is a giant ape. Number 5. Franklin Richards. While he may not be considered entirely a cosmic level superhero, Franklin Richards, the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, is destined to become a key factor in the cosmic landscape of the Marvel Universe. His power to warp reality is so great that he has created entire pocket universes. Now, in one reality, appearing in Fantastic Four Volume 1, number 604, Franklin appeared as an adult, and we saw a glimpse of just how powerful he can be. In the story, a grown Franklin and Valeria Richards worked together with their grandfather, Nathaniel Richards, to travel into the past to influence their younger counterparts and to help fight against the Mad Celestials that were threatening the entire world. Galactus was called on by the Fantastic Four to help, and although he brought down one Celestial, the others combined their power and were too much for Galactus to handle. Enter Franklin. Restoring Galactus and imbuing him with enough cosmic energy to stand up to the Celestials, Franklin turned Galactus into his own herald, defeating the Celestials and then being humble enough to give up that power after the fight was over. All the other heroes could do was just look up into the sky and watch in awe. It was actually kinda epic. Number 4. John Stewart Green Lantern. A Green Lantern's power ring is capable of almost anything, but even it has its limits. However, that didn't stop John Stewart from attempting to recreate an entire solar system in Green Lantern number 26. When reflecting on the destruction of the planet Xanshi and its solar system, which is an event that John blames himself for, the hero tried his damnedest to try and bring the world back with just his ring. He broke past the programming of his ring and got pretty damn close to completely rebuilding the entire solar system. Unfortunately, such a construct was too much even with John's iron will, but the fact that he got so close shows how far a power ring can really go when effort is put into it. But let's try one even more than that, shall we? Yeah. Number 3. Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan was possibly the greatest Green Lantern ever, according to the comics at least. But in the 90s, that kinda changed. After the death of Superman and the subsequent reign of the Supermen, Coast City, Hal Jordan's home, was destroyed. This completely changed the Lantern, and he completely broke the programming of his own power ring to revive the city. He created the entire city's layout with all of its buildings, parks, streets, everything. But it wasn't quite right. It wasn't the same. It needed life. So Hal went completely against the Green Lantern's rules and made constructs of all the once living inhabitants of Coast City, millions of people. When the Guardians of the Universe tried to stop him, he completely snapped. He went off the handle, ending the lives of every Green Lantern and naming himself Parallax. Hal became a threat to the whole DC universe for like a decade before eventually sacrificing himself. Sure, he went bad, but he absolutely did not hold back against anyone. Number 2. Orion. Orion is a new god and the son of Darkseid, and as a hero with a dark ancestry, he is quite the conflicted do-gooder. He has many forms and he has many abilities. He exists beyond the normal multiverse on a higher plane called the Sphere of the Gods. Born on Apokolips but adopted by the gods of New Genesis, Orion is in a constant war with his inner darkness and with his father, Darkseid. Orion is repeatedly praised and stated to be a warrior with skill and ferocity second to none, and in one of his many displays of pure power, he completely wipes out his father. When Darkseid came to Earth, heroes like the Atom and an empowered Jimmy Olsen fought him until a boom tube opened up and Orion came out. The heroes stood aside and let Orion fight Darkseid on his own, and he absolutely wrecked the guy in one slog of a fight. At the end of the fight, after beating down on Darkseid to the level of wiping out entire city blocks, Orion wiped out Darkseid by plunging his hand straight into his father's chest, grabbing his fiery heart and ripping it out clean, leaving Darkseid as a pile of charred bones. And finally, in at number 1 today, the Sentry. Near the end of the Planet Hulk storyline, the shuttle the Hulk was sent to Sakaar in by the Illuminati at the beginning blows up, wiping out Hulk's new family and the lives of millions of individuals on Sakaar. This pushes the Hulk into a whole new level of anger, which is directed squarely at the Illuminati. So he headed to Earth with his War Sworn. When he got to Earth, after quickly stopping at the moon to wreck Black Bolt, he headed to New York, giving the city a time limit to be evacuated, and when that time limit stopped, he defeated everyone who was left. Iron Man and the Hulkbuster, the Avengers plus their tower, the US Army, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Juggernaut, Doctor Strange using the power of Zom, and the Ghost Rider, all while saving innocent bystanders. He then threw the Illuminati members he captured into the ring against each other, sparing them only as he sought justice, not to end lives. Well, the Illuminati had one last-ditch effort to stop the Hulk. The Sentry. Coming in against probably the only being who could take it, Sentry unleashed almost everything he had against the Hulk, leveling city blocks and causing a massive column of fire. These two went blow for blow over and over until they both used up so much energy that they reverted back to their regular human forms, with a depowered Bruce Banner getting in a final punch to bring Sentry down.
At number 10, it was just an accident. In one event, Spider-Man accidentally caused the demise of Agent Charlemagne. She put herself in harm's way, intercepting a blow meant for Wolverine, leading to her tragic demise. This incident weighed heavily on Spider-Man's conscience, leaving a lasting impact on him. Despite encounters where he unintentionally caused demises, Charlemagne's loss affected him profoundly, marking the first time he ever felt directly responsible for taking a life. Spider-Man struggled with guilt and remorse, grappling with the weight of his actions, unable to forgive himself for what happened. This experience added a layer of complexity to his journey, highlighting the emotional toll and ethical dilemmas heroes face when confronting the consequences of their actions. At number 9 is his fight against Fire-Lord. Fire-Lord is a cosmic being who's held his own against some heavy hitters like Thor, the X-Men, and even went toe-to-toe with the Phoenix Force. But in one instance, he clashed with Spider-Man in Amazing Spider-Man number 270. Spider-Man had a different approach, opting to outsmart rather than overpower. He led Fire-Lord on a wild chase through the city, trying unconventional methods to take him out, like luring him into a building set for demolition, or a gas station to explode and exploit his powers. Despite the relentless effort, none of these ploys managed to take Fire-Lord down. The most unexpected strategy of all was simply to, well, punch him a lot. Spider-Man's persistence paid off, and through a frenzied attack, he inadvertently triumphed. So much so that the Avengers had to actually step in and intervene, pulling Spider-Man off of Fire-Lord's body. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Back in Black story, where Spider-Man's shift back to his black costume marks a darker turn. Discovering Kingpin's role in Aunt May's assassination attempt, Peter Parker unleashes his hidden strength. He abandons his usual wit, publicly confronting and absolutely brutalizing Kingpin, revealing the immense power he often restrains against his weaker foes. Spider-Man goes as far as threatening Kingpin's life if he ever endangers the Parkers again, a stance he takes to the extreme in a separate reality explored in the What If series. This narrative showcased Spider-Man's capacity for extreme actions when pushed to his limit, emphasizing the consequences of his unparalleled strength when gone unchecked. At number 7 is the iconic Superior Spidey versus Scorpion. During the Superior Spider-Man comic arc, where Dr. Octopus seizes control of Spider-Man's body and unleashes a devastating punch that cleanly knocks the jaw off of Scorpion. This punch, almost effortless for Peter Parker, shocks Doc Ock, revealing the immense power Spider-Man had concealed this whole time. It's a stark revelation that Spider-Man had been restraining his immense strength all along. It dawns on Dr. Octopus that Peter Parker was holding back in their battles, a realization that astounds him. The notion that Spider-Man in his kindness or self-restraint had refrained from using his full force against adversaries left Doc Ock surprised at the level of power at Peter Parker's disposal. At number 6 is Professor Xavier, the big brain behind the X-Men. He packs a serious telepathic punch. He's almost like a superhero wizard in the X-Men universe, as only a handful can match his mind-meddling prowess. Picture this, he can slip into multiple minds simultaneously, chat across crazy distances, and even erase memories. The thing is, Xavier's mind isn't all sunshines and rainbows. At one point, a spooky Xavier doppelganger took a swing at the new-gen X-Men. It was his repressed dark side breaking loose due to a whole bunch of stress. Then, down the line, a mashup of his power and Magneto's worst bits birthed Onslaught. This guy was super mega powerful and mega bad. It took a truckload of heroes to zap him out. Now Xavier's pushing daisies, but in comic land, staying unalive isn't permanent. At number 5 is the Flash. See, the thing about force, not the speed force just yet, although I'll talk about it in a second, but just applied force in general, is that the strength behind your blow is dependent on the mass of your fist and the acceleration. And while Barry's got a thin frame, he basically maxes out the acceleration, meaning he can pack a serious punch. See, Barry Allen's not just about running fast. He's got a lot more under his red suit. Barry packs a punch with his powers generating crazy amounts of energy and tapping into something called the Speed Force, which basically grants him mind-bending abilities like time travel and hopping between dimensions. So why doesn't he unleash his full power? Maybe because he's scared of turning out like a speedster foes, or a subconscious reluctance due to his painful past losing his folks and dealing with his dad's wrongful imprisonment. At number 4 is Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards, son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, is a big deal in Marvel Comics. Imagine having the strength of a god, but being just a kid. As a toddler, he had these mind-bending abilities that were super risky. His dad, Mr. Fantastic, thought it was better to wait until Franklin was older before letting him loose with these powers. Then there was this huge incident called Onslaught that I mentioned earlier. The bad guy wanted to get even more powerful by teaming up with Franklin. Franklin's reality-bending skills helped Onslaught fight off big shots like the X-Men, the Avengers, and more. Sadly, some heroes ended up sacrificing themselves to stop Onslaught. But Franklin's powers are so epic that space gods called the Celestials even took notice. Now recently, even though his powers have been nerfed, they seem to be making a comeback, so when the Fantastic Four do make a comeback, Franklin might just hold the key to saving, or maybe even deciding the fate of the whole universe yet again. At number 3 is Superman. Superman, you know, that superhero dude, seriously strong. Like, seriously strong. He's got all these powers that are like, make him faster than a speeding bullet, stronger than a train, jump really high, but here's the thing, he has to hold back, like, all the time. Like, imagine having to open a door gently, afraid that you might yank it off its hinges by accident. That's basically his daily life. When he fights bad guys, he can't just go all out. No, he has to be careful not to wreck everything around him, and including the bad guy's face. Even the baddest of bad guys like Darkseid or Doomsday can't match him, so he's gotta play smart. His powers of flying and shooting lasers from his eyes are pretty awesome for beating baddies, but he's gotta be careful. At number 2 is Goku. Now I know this one isn't Marvel or DC, but I'm sure y'all can forgive me, because Goku is just a badass. Originally thought to be from Earth, this Saiyan warrior with extraordinary strength packs some serious punch. But he often holds back, so like he can unleash mind-bending top-tier strength whenever he wants, but he never really does. See, Goku's got this thing where he holds back during fights, as a superhero can defeat the bad guys in a snap, but he decides to take it slow, giving the villains a chance to catch up. Weird, but that's Goku for you. He's got this move called the Ki, thinking of it as a superpower juice that he can shoot from his hands, but instead of going all out and ending fights quick, he enjoys stretching out the battles. He fought this dude called Cell once, but he didn't go full throttle because he just wanted to keep things interesting. He'd rather have a thrilling fight than just outright crush his opponents. The thing is, with hardly anyone in his universe capable of matching his strength, Goku rarely shows what he's really made of. And at number 1 is Spider-Man. Like I said, you guys, I'm biased. But not really, because Spider-Man often seems to have power that's kind of on the down low. See, back in the day, Spidey had a tough time fighting big baddies like the Sinister Six. But fast forward, and now he's slinging punches with the best of them, even taking down the Hulk in one comic arc. During the Superior Spider-Man storyline where Doc Ock takes over Spider-Man's body, things got really eye-opening as Doc Ock threw a punch at Scorpion, thinking that he knew Spidey's strength, but bam! He ended up accidentally ripping Scorpion's jaw right off his head. That shocked Doc Ock big time and made him realize that Spider-Man was holding back all this immense power every time they clashed. Imagine all those fights where Spider-Man could have crushed his enemies with one hit, but he didn't. Superheroes holding back their full strength might be all about responsibility or just not wanting to hurt anyone too bad. Sometimes, it's mind-blowing to see what they could do if they unleashed their full power. And as always, if there is a super powerful villain that keeps it to himself that you think I've missed, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And maybe, just maybe, this video gets enough attention, I'll include your suggestions in the next iteration of this list. At number 10 is Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul isn't your typical bad guy. He's the big boss of the League of Assassins, a group that's been specializing in, you guessed it, assassinations. But there's more to him than just that. His constant swims in the Lazarus pits messed up his humanity big time. He's practically more of a devil than a regular person. Now, for those of you uninitiated in Batman lore, the Laz pits are those pools of green goo that are kind of like DC's own Fountain of Youth, as these supernatural reservoirs are capable of instantly healing any injury, resurrecting the deceased, or even granting immortality. Ra's discovered these pits centuries ago go, allowing him to carry out his assassination business indefinitely. Now, while these pits are great for his mortality, this prolonged use of these pits does come at a cost to his morality. I mean, what does he really need that anyways, being a supervillain and literally the boss of an assassination business? I digress. Whenever he does take a dip in these pits, his plans get worse. Like, way worse. He goes toe-to-toe with Batman a lot, claiming that he's all about saving the planet, but here's a twist. He thinks that wiping out almost all of humanity is the way to do it. Yeah, you heard me right. Ra's al Ghul believes that the best solution for Earth is to get rid of almost everyone so that the survivors can be ruled by a chosen few. Yeah, definitely not your average bad guy. At number 9 is Lady Shiva, a top-notch assassin in Gotham City who doesn't hold back when it comes to dishing out pain. Her expertise in combat and precision unaliving makes her one of the most sought-after mercenaries in the DC multiverse, even among leagues of assassins that have skin in the game for centuries. Now, unlike other villains, Shiva isn't about physical pain. See, she knows how to hurt in various ways. You see, inflicting pain is an art form to her, so it's not just about landing punches or using weapons. No. Shiva knows that hurting someone's pride or sense of self can be just as agonizing. She's not afraid to make her victims suffer in ways that go beyond the bodies. Now, what sets her apart from less patient villains is her understanding that keeping someone alive allows for prolonged suffering compared to a quick demise. So while she's fully ready, willing, and definitely capable of ending lives, she prefers to keep her victims just on the edge of life, ensuring they feel every ounce of pain she inflicts for as long as possible. Lady Shiva doesn't just stop at physical harm, she's a master at making pain linger in every possible way. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing the notification bell. It's free! At number 8 is Bane. Bane is one of Batman's toughest foes, and he didn't have an easy life. He learned to protect himself while spending his entire youth in the world's most lethal confinement center. But that protection and need for self-defense eventually turned into a liking for violence. At the age of only 8, he committed his first unaliving. Yeah, while y'all were probably still potty training, Bane was out here terminating folks. As he got older, things got even more intense. Some scientists forcibly used him as a guinea pig to test out this substance called Venom, which I wish was the Venom from Marvel, but no. In this case, it's basically steroids on steroids. Bane got addicted to it and gained super strength. His unique mix of both strategic brains and excessive brawn make him a huge danger to Batman and frankly all of Gotham. What makes Bane especially frightening is his habit of breaking Batman's back. It's like he's always trying to prove he's the toughest, scariest guy around, and with his strength and smarts, it's hard to disagree. At number 7 is Solomon Grundy. Solomon Grundy is a swampy figure in the DC comics who's typically portrayed as, how do you put it nicely so he doesn't come after me, a bit dumb. Now, don't get me wrong, Grundy isn't your run-of-the-mill villain. He's often played as a pawn, easily tricked into doing bad stuff by the big baddies. Now, sometimes though, he hangs with the good guys, but that's exceedingly rare. See, the thing about Grundy is he's a bit of a wild card. When someone's got a hold on him, he's like their attack dog. Imagine being nearly impossible to knock out and always up for causing trouble. That's basically Grundy in a nutshell. His loyalty to whoever's pulling his strings combined with his own stubbornness make him a real wrecking ball. Now, since he's already undead, putting him down is seriously tough. So he doesn't get knocked out often, which means he's always ready to dish out some serious hurt. It's like dealing with a force of nature that's not gonna stop until he's done with you. At number 6 is Morlun. In 2001's The Amazing Spider-Man, a grim brawl unfurled between Spider-Man and the villain Morlun. Unlike his usual foes, Morlun fed on spider essence, making this encounter particularly dangerous for Spidey. But aware of Morlun's weakness to radiation, Spidey weaponized his own tainted spider essence against him. Inflicting a potentially lethal dose, Spider-Man hesitated when Morlun begged for mercy, only for the villain's minion to swiftly finish him off. Though Spider-Man didn't deal the final blow here, he purposefully brought Morlun to the edge of demise. Not only did this arc introduce intriguing new powers to Spider-Man, but also showcase a darker, more ruthless side of the hero, revealing a brutal aspect of Spider-Man's character which hinted at a threshold he teeter on, where mercy tangled with the urge for justice. At number 5 is the Grim Hunt. In this saga, the grim hunt, Spider faced the Karvinoff family's wrath in their ruthless quest targeting spider-powered heroes. Unlike the typical Spider-Man tales, this story gets intense. You see, when he's pushed to his limit, he unleashes a darker side, and in a shockingly violent act, Spidey uses his unique adhesive abilities to brutally retaliate against a Karvinoff member for eliminating his clone Kane, tearing off the villain's face. Yeah, this narrative marked a departure from Spidey's usual moral code, showcasing a grittier, more aggressive side of our friendly neighborhood hero, revealing how far he'd go and push beyond his limits. At number 4, tossing tanks and trucks. In the heat of battle against Green Goblin, Ultimate Spider-Man did something extraordinary, lifting an 18-wheeler truck and bringing it down on the Green Goblin's face. At just 16, Peter showcased incredible strength, proving that age is no limit to powers. Later, facing the Absorbing Man, Spider-Man intercepted a hurled truck, showcasing his swift reflexes and superhuman strength by stopping an entire armored vehicle mid-air. Even when facing tanks and mercenaries, Spidey didn't hold back. In a high-stakes rescue mission, he hoisted a tank above his head and smashed it down. While Spider-Man's usual strength hovers around 20 tons, moments like these reveal his ability to push beyond that, especially when lives are on the line. At number 3, benching entire buildings. In Spider-Man Final Chapter, he's holding up the entire Daily Bugle, not for himself, but for everybody else's safety. And that's no easy feat too, especially when the city he's trying to protect starts turning against him. Plus, Aunt May's on a ticking time bomb, and so talk about the pressure. Here's the thing about Spidey, even when the world is on his shoulders, he doesn't buckle. He pushes through, stops that bomb, and keeps the Bugle from becoming a pile of rubble. In a separate issue, Dr. Kirk Connors aimed to use a contraption within New York's sewers to rid himself of the reptilian transformation. However, unbeknownst to him, a lethal trap awaited beneath Penn Station. As Spider-Man attempted to reason with the Lizard, chaos ensued. Consumed by his primal instincts, the Lizard brought Penn Station crashing down, burying Spider-Man under its colossal weight. Aware that even the mighty Thor would falter beneath such an overwhelming burden, Peter grappled with the weight, his muscles straining against the impossible load. Yet against all odds, determination surged within him, a testament to his unwavering resolve. He defied the impossible, summoning the strength to lift the collapsed station, liberating himself from the wreckage's grasp. And lastly in this entry is in If This Be My Destiny, Spider-Man faced a monumental challenge, an entire underwater facility collapsing atop of him. Weakened by a prior fight, he struggled immensely, unable to lift the colossal weight off of himself, submerged underwater. Faced with Aunt May's life on the line, Spider-Man almost gave up before remembering how he failed to save his Uncle Ben. Unwilling to let it happen again with Aunt May, Peter resolves to fight on and lifts the giant mechanism to free himself, summoning every ounce of strength to hoist the structure, facing excruciating pain in the process. At number 2 is Juggernaut. In the showdown titled Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, Spider-Man faced a real tough time. It was like an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. You see, nothing Spidey tried seemed to make a dent in stopping that big tough dude. The Juggernaut's on a mission to nab Madame Web, thinking that her powers will give him an edge against the X-Men. But Web gets the heads up and rings Spidey for help. The thing is, it's not smooth sailing. Spider-Man tries all of his moves, but nothing sticks. The Juggernaut is just too strong and relentless. He gets dangerously close to taking Madame Web out for good, and that's when Spider-Man goes all in. He doesn't hold back anymore. Leading the Juggernaut to a construction zone, he cooks up a plan and then bam, traps him in wet cement. Goes to show that sometimes it's not about brute strength, but about how smart and persistent you are. And in that moment, Spidey proved that determination and quick thinking can win even the toughest battles. And at number 1 is his fight against Green Goblin, when Spider-Man faced a devastating loss of...
One of the other abilities that he doesn't have is her sonic scream. Kara can emit a scream of extremely high amplitude that can cause havoc to her enemies. Now, what's weird is that she doesn't really use that powerful ability all that often. It's not really clear why, and it may be a bit more of a meta reason, as it has perhaps been limited throughout history so that Black Canary's canary cry is not diminished by comparison. Number 4, Swamp Thing. Alec Holland was a scientist who created a restorative growth formula before being doused in the chemical by gangsters and set on fire. He jumped in a nearby swamp and was reborn as the Swamp Thing. Now, eventually, it was revealed that Alec Holland had actually perished that night, and the creature was a humanoid plant elemental with Alec's memories. Regardless, the Swamp Thing is basically a god. An earth elemental and avatar of the green, essentially a god of plants with unimaginable levels of superhuman strength, durability, and inability to feel pain. He can regenerate regenerate from plant life, he can move at the speed of light, alter his size drastically, shapeshift to grant himself abilities like flight and duplication. He has control over plants, which allows him to teleport through plant life as well, and thanks to his connection to the green, he can even move through time and possesses cosmic awareness. But those are just some of his abilities. One other ability he rarely uses is the ability to possess a human body. Swamp Thing did this in 1998's Swamp Thing number 76 when he inhabited the body of John Constantine in order to, well, basically Alec used Constantine's body so he could finally make love to his wife, Abigail Arcane, which led to the birth of their daughter, Tifi Holland. It's a little disturbing to think about, but still, I don't know if he's holding back, but he doesn't use it often. Number 3, Martian Manhunter. Okay, so this power differs greatly from the others on this list, as it's not really destructive at all. It's actually incredibly nice. John Jones's list of powers eclipses even the Man of Steel's. He has many offensive and defensive abilities. One of his lesser known powers is the ability to project complex illusions into people's minds. These illusions feel entirely real, and John has often used them to distract and cause mental chaos in opponents. However, another less destructive version of the power is called Mayavana, and it is seen as the greatest gift a Martian can bestow on another person. It is a benevolent vision which is intended to give someone the experience of what they desire most. So, most Martians use it on the one they love the most. It can also only be used one time, as the mental stress on its creator is way too high. Number 2, Zatanna. Zatanna's limits have never fully been established, with her power set varying depending on who is writing about her at any given time. Now initially, during her first adventures with the Justice League, her powers were quite limited, consisting in the manipulation of fire, air, water, and earth. As time has gone on, she has been shown to be one of the most capable sorcerers in the entire DC universe. The source of her powers is apparently genetic, as she inherited her father's gifts for manipulating magic and casting spells of intense power. The thing about Zatanna though is that her power is limited by her self-confidence. Because of that, and because of the fact that she doesn't really have the greatest confidence ever all the time, she doesn't usually use her magical abilities to her fullest potential. Because of this, she can be just a smidge inconsistent, like how the Zatanna from Earth 3, Anataz Arataz, I think that's how you pronounce it, was actually capable of stopping Mr. Mxyzptlk from accessing his 5th dimensional abilities. Zatanna has fixed the entire multiverse and brought a bunny back to life when she was a kid, but despite that, there was a time after a series of errors caused her confidence to be shattered, she was rendered completely and totally powerless for a little bit of time. And finally, in at number 1, Aquaman. Prior to the New 52 reboot, Aquaman possessed the ability to tap directly into a force known as the Clear. This primordial force is what binds all life in the sea and provides ocean-themed heroes with their superpowers. Thanks to his harnessing of the Clear, Aquaman's awesome natural telepathy was augmented to a larger degree, allowing him to communicate with and summon sea creatures from the other side of the planet and send out telepathic broadcasts across the ocean. It even allowed him to form a universal consciousness with all life in the sea, enabling him to send his mind out to see through the eyes of sea life. Something interesting about this force is that technically all life at some point originated from the ocean. So, Aquaman can also push his telepathic powers to reach out to the higher land creatures to find that element of their brain that was once an aquatic dwelling creature and manipulate it. Now, post New 52, this connection to the Clear has been altered slightly and is now known as a connection with the Life Force. The Life Force is one of the 7 forces of the universe, and for Aquaman, his connection to the Life Force is focused on marine life, and not just the marine life of Earth either. Through the Life Force, Arthur is connected to all living beings, which has enabled him to establish a supernatural link to any and all sentient entities throughout the cosmos. He can use this connection to determine a being's origin, as he was able to determine that the Void Song comes from an ocean planet after being in close contact with it. With the Life Force, a lot of his abilities are similar to the connection to the Clear, with a whole bunch more still unknown even to Aquaman, which leaves some pretty exciting potential for his character and what powers he could possess in the future.
Number 10, Daredevil. When Matt Murdock was a child, he was hit by a truck that was carrying toxic radioactive isotopes. He got some gunk in his eyes, and as a result, he was blinded. But this being Marvel Comics, the radiation heightened his other senses to the point that he was given his trademark radar sense, which allows him to do sick flips and fight crime as Daredevil. Daredevil is quite a religious fellow who also believes in letting the legal system do its work as much as possible, so he has a pretty strict stance against killing people, believing that the criminals he fights should be taken to prison and left alive. This has put him at odds with other more lethal characters like the Punisher, who thinks that the only good criminal is a dead criminal. But despite the fact that he is often tempted, Daredevil holds back, using his ninja skills to brutalize and maim, but not to kill. This self-imposed rule has been broken a couple times, such as when he was possessed by a demon, when he was forced to shoot a helicopter pilot who was using a minigun to brutalize Hell's Kitchen, and when he attempted to shoot the Punisher, when Frank had tied him up and taped a gun to his hand. But once again, these are pretty extreme situations where he didn't really have any other options. Number 9, Professor X. Charles Xavier is the leader of the X-Men and the founder of a school for gifted youngsters where he trains young mutants to control their powers so that they don't accidentally destroy buildings on the regular. He is an extremely powerful mutant, being able to read and control people's minds. In theory, he could force anyone to do pretty much anything he wants. Thankfully, Xavier shows a decent amount of restraint with his powers, and usually makes a point of not reading his students' minds without permission, and rarely using them to make people act against their nature. For example, considering that governments in the Marvel Universe are consistently passing anti-mutant legislation, it would be very tempting to control the responsible politicians' minds to force them not to vote for such measures. But he doesn't do stuff like that. Sure, he has a bit of a god complex, and has a history of wiping people's minds when he screws up, or dampening Jean Grey's powers until he feels she's ready for them. But overall, he shows a lot of restraint. Outside the comics, in the X-Men 2 movie, we even see that while using Cerebro, Professor X could kill every mutant or human in existence simply by concentrating. So, yeah, he's holding back. Number 8, Batman. Batman is similar to Daredevil in the regard that he is one of the most gifted martial artists in the world and has extensive knowledge on how to handle any situation. Like Daredevil, he also has a strict moral code that prevents him from killing any of the criminals he faces, despite the fact that he certainly could with ease. For example, in Book 1 of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman is fighting against a group of thugs, and in his inner monologue, we can see him playing out strategies, saying, "There are 7 working defenses from this position. 3 of them disarm with minimal contact. 3 of them kill, and the other hurts." He, of course, chooses the option that hurts. But it is a good example of how, as a master strategist, in any situation, he is aware of how he could kill, but chooses not to. This is due to him not wanting to go down the path of his villains, and having a desire to see criminals reform, often hiring criminals who are let out of prison to work at Wayne Enterprises. So, like Daredevil, he has a strict moral code, but he is better than Daredevil at sticking to it, earning him the higher slot. Number 7, Thor. Thor is literally the god of thunder. He can bring down lightning, he can smash stuff with his hammer, and he is an amazing warrior with centuries of combat experience. In fact, he was so powerful and arrogant that his father, Odin, sent him to Earth in order to temper his power with humility. For those only familiar with movie Thor, in the comics, Odin sent Thor to Earth with no memories of his life as a god, and made him believe that he was a doctor with a bum leg named Donald Blake. As detailed in the character's first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 83, he spent a decade on Earth learning the value of hard work and perseverance as he dealt with his injured leg and set up his own medical practice. After this decade had passed, Odin implanted a message in Thor's subconscious telling him to go to Norway, where he found his hammer and regained his godly identity. I don't know if this is full-on holding his power back, but the fact that he went through all of that to learn humility and what it meant to be worthy of his powers shows that Thor is very aware of his powers and the proper way to use them.
Number 6. Liz Sherman. Liz Sherman was first seen in Hellboy: Seed of Destruction back in 1994, and is a being of immense power that she does not want and struggles to control. Her holding back is that quest for control and a fear of what happens when she loses it. Liz has pyrokinesis, the fire-starting ability, and oh, what a fire it is. Her powers manifested when she was 10 years old, and because of her strict religious upbringing, she thought they were a punishment from God for her sins. This has caused her to form a very complex relationship with them. It also didn't help that at age 11 she lost control and killed her whole family. To learn to control her powers, she had to learn emotional control, as that is what triggers them. She has to hold back her emotions and keep them on an even keel, all while wrestling with the bitterness her powers have left her with. Not fun. Number 5. The Flash. Any of them, doesn't really matter which. They're always holding back. Their natural speed is now fast. It's not the normal speed that the rest of us are moving at. They're just constantly moving through molasses to make us feel comfortable. Cause if not, it'd be like the Reverse Flash, how he just lets himself vibrate, which is terrifying. Just slightly out of phase. Always kind of crackling, red eyes. But the Flashes don't do that because they're nice people. Still, there is a sadness to it, and it makes their good cheer more impressive. To always be being a bit out of step, having to be patient always as the people around you move as fast as they can, but it'll never be fast enough for you. It could leave you feeling disconnected, and again, the time travel possibilities of not holding back. Barry Allen created the New 52 reboot because of his meddling, even though the Doomsday crossover was trying to make that Dr. Manhattan's fault, but it took too long to come out. Art delays. We're only on issue 10. It's been years. Number 4. The Spectre. The Spectre first debuted in More Fun Comics number 52 back in 1940. Cliff notes. The Spectre is the spirit of vengeance who carries out his missions through human hosts. The first was Jim Corrigan, a police officer who made the mistake of getting engaged in a fictional story, so he was murdered. The last part was the Golden Age. He became an avenging spirit in the Silver Age, and he can be very harsh. He has godlike powers and can, wait for it, manipulate time and space, control all matter, has invulnerability, and limitless strength. So how is he holding back? Well, he's really held back by the morality of his hosts. The Spectre exists in a kind of dual host-like existence. The host is there, they're not fully subsumed, and they can resist some of the Spectre's more cruel impulses.
You can't kill a dead man.
The guilty must be punished for their crimes.
If they want to. Some hosts just go with it. Corrigan is notable for this. Hal Jordan was also a host for the Spectre, and he always fought him. This was after Hal died redeeming himself by blowing up the sun. He was then the Spectre until he was resurrected. Also, he would still go on dates with Carol as the Spectre. It was kind of awful. She could never move on with her life until she did, and then he came back to life. Poor Carol. Actually, no, she's awful to Hal. One day I'll tell you the full story of how she once got mad at Hal because he blew her off to save a dying planet. I mean, what's more important? Ferris Air being attacked or a planet breaking apart like Krypton? Number 3. Gambit. Gambit is a lot more powerful than people think. He first debuted in Uncanny X-Men Annual number 14 back in 1990. His powers work by converting the potential energy stored in an inanimate object into pure light kinetic energy, and he has a lot of potential to harness energy also. He also has hypnotic charm. In an alternate storyline, when his full potential was reached, he became New Sun. In this state, he could control all aspects of kinetic energy down to the molecular level, so he can manipulate the potency of energy, which yes, was as terrifying as it sounds. He could then simulate pretty much any type of energy, and of course time travel and cross dimensions in space, and just remake things to his will by turning into pure energy and joining the kinetic flow. Thankfully, the Gambit this happened to was an alternate reality one. Main vs. Gambit actually went up against this counterpart and was left less powerful as a result. Also, Gambit can now convert inert materials into toxic substances. It's a good thing Gambit just likes throwing his playing cards, because he could kill us all. Powers on top of powers, with X-Men, sometimes too much. Blame Grant Morrison and secondary mutations, and also the ever-sliding power scale. Number 2. Reed Richards. This is a case of a couple of things. Sometimes he forgets about his abilities because he defeats his enemies more with his intellect and inventions. Another way he's holding back is that he can be a lot more devilish than he is in terms of proactively destroying threats, but the only thing holding him back is what Sue would think. We've seen this a few times. There was a what-if story. What if Sue Storm died in childbirth, and after she dies, Reed just goes off the deep end, murdering their villains, claiming she was the only thing stopping him, but with her gone, what's the point? The sketchy things he does, he also does behind her back. The Council of Reeds when he joined that League of Alternate Universe Reeds. most of which had gauntlets. The whole Illuminati thing. So his family and love, but specifically Sue, is all that's keeping Reed in check. She can't leave him for Namor, and Namor's been trying hard. He even told Reed he was trying, but that she wouldn't leave. The modern Fantastic Four run is trying to pretend Sue and Namor aren't a thing, for some reason. But I'll never forget. And bearded nice guy Reed? We'll see how long that lasts. Number 1. Superman. Hey, obvious, but he deserves it. The Man of Steel is always holding back. The launcher of the golden age of both heroes and comics has seen his powers grow a lot since his creation in 1938. His strength and potential are held in check by his inherent goodness and belief in humanity. When he uses his full potential, we usually end up with a dark Superman. Somebody mentioned it in the comments of part 1 and I was going to mention it anyway, but one of the best examples of this is from the finale of the Justice League Unlimited when Superman fights Darkseid and gives his famous "I feel like I live in a world of cardboard" speech.
I feel like I live in a world made of cardboard, always taking constant care not to break something, to break someone. Never allowing myself to lose control, even for a moment, or someone could die.
Superman has been holding back since he was a child. At this point, it's a habit, second nature, and thank goodness for that. The world couldn't handle a Superman always using his full power set, no matter how much kryptonite Batman has. Side note, does anyone else remember that story where Bruce helped Clark find and destroy all the kryptonite in the world? I was like, aw, sweet, and also like, that would never happen simultaneously. Number 10. Booster Gold. Firstly, Booster's powers are tech-based, yes, but they still count. Michael Carter, aka Booster Gold, first appeared in Booster Gold number 1 back in 1986, and has changed a lot since his first appearance, though in adaptation form he is often stuck in that mode that he first appeared in. Booster is just an average person in the 25th century living in Gotham, down on his luck after he had been caught throwing football games. He ended up in disgrace and was working in a museum as a night watchman, and with the help of the security robot Skeets, he stole a bunch of tech and combined it to create his costume and went back in time pretending to be a hero from the future. At first he was really only interested in the fame and the merchandising. So much merchandising. But over time he transitioned into a real hero, and is sometimes quite crippled by the weight of the power he holds, particularly time travel. Booster can go and change pretty much anything, but there will be ramifications. Possibly one of the saddest time travel Booster stories is when he went back in time to save his best friend, the second Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, from being killed by Maxwell Lord. However, this messed up the timeline, but he was willing to live with it, just so that he could have his friend back. But when the Blue Beetle found out, he couldn't let him be so selfish and voluntarily went back to take his place in the timeline. Booster has to keep his selfish nature in check when it comes to time travel, and for the most part he does. Uses it pretty responsibly, but it weighs on him. Holding back can be a burden, but it's part of what makes one a true hero. Number 9. Black Bolt. Time to get real obvious. Black Bolt first debuted in Fantastic Four number 45 back in 1965 and is a core member of the Inhumans, royalty. He can't speak. I mean, he can, but he shouldn't. His speech center in his brain is different. It produces an unknown particle that interacts with the electrons in his brain, which has caused him to have the most devastating sonic scream out there. Just whispering, he could destroy pretty much anything and anyone. Now Black Bolt can control and channel his powers a bit with the help of his costume. That top part is a tuning fork, it's not just decoration. But he's hyper aware of this and so is always very careful. Still, you learn a lot when you can't speak. Black Bolt knows things. And he's a secret weapon when you really need someone stopped. You can convince him to speak and he only needs to say one thing, and that's it. Number 8. The Scarlet Witch. So her powers have been tweaked and retweaked over time. They're trying to get away from the all-consuming reality warping powers that gave the world House of M and the whole no more mutants thing. But for a time, and she still kinda does, have to be hyper aware of her powers because she had a history of triggering them subconsciously based on her own desires, like the saga of her and Vision's children, which has been rendered more complicated in the modern era. Wanda Maximoff first debuted in the X-Men number 4 back in 1964 and has changed a lot since then. Her powers are now in the chaos magic realm with a mutant element on top, so there's more control, which is good, because the ability to change whatever one wants, that's a lot of a lot. It would and does drive most who hold it mad. Too much power, too much, beyond Omega. Number 7. Cable. Here we're getting into the has to hold back category, or rather had to hold back. He first appeared as Cable in the New Mutants number 87 back in 1990. He had been introduced as Nathan Summers in 1986. Back then he was just a baby and not a man out of time. Cable has very powerful telekinetic powers, but initially he had to use them to keep the techno-organic virus he was suffering from spreading to the rest of his body. That used to be the source of his cool metal arm. When he doesn't have to hold back, Cable is a force to be reckoned with. It's that dangerous combination of telepathy and telekinesis, along with that sense of self-righteousness he inherited from his father Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Cable has built his own utopian floating city. That was during the Deadpool and Cable team-up. good times. Cable is one who has fluctuating powers. He has them all. Oh no, they're gone. Oh yay, some of them are back. It just depends which area you're in.
And at 6, Captain Atom. Captain Atom is a case of a hero who is already quite powerful but is limited by his own fears that if he were to fulfill his full potential, he may lose his humanity. Talking Dr. Manhattan style here. So Captain Atom, in theory, has no limit to his powers. His abilities come from his atoms continuously splitting and reforming, which gives him an infinite amount of power, limited only by his willpower and his imagination. He can manipulate energy, is self-sustaining, has super strength that matches that of Superman's, and can travel faster than the speed of sound. If he absorbs too much energy at once though, he can be transported through time uncontrollably. Now his power source is linked to something called the strong nuclear force, which binds protons to the nucleus. His atoms can lose coherence if he uses too much power in a short space of time, but it is speculated that he'll be able to overcome this at some point, meaning only his own willpower to retain his humanity is what prevents him from further excelling. And at number 5, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange generally has a very strong sense of what is right and what is wrong, and what he should meddle with and what he shouldn't. Often he finds himself practicing restraint in situations he'd dominate and solve much quicker if he were to intervene. Case in point, Civil War. The Watcher commented that Strange could have ended the conflict with a mere thought, implying that the Sorcerer Supreme has a whole lot more power than he's letting on. Instead, Strange went off to meditate in seclusion, letting Cap and Iron Man duke it out. There have also been times when Strange's hand was forced and he called upon powerful dark magic, like when he battled the Hulk post-Civil War, which caused him to lose the title of Sorcerer Supreme briefly. It just goes to show that Strange has the best interests of the Earth at heart, unwilling to use riskier and deadlier forms of magic he has at his disposal in order to get what needs to be done. And at number 4, Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is not just one individual. The character who first debuted in More Fun Comics issue 55 back in 1940 is a long line of sorcerers, each who had come upon Nabu the Wise, a god who granted them their power along with the Helmet of Fate, a mystical artifact that transforms its host into a powerful master of magic. Those donning the Dr. Fate mantle are capable of spellcasting, flight, telekinesis, telepathy, pyrokinesis, superhuman strength, invulnerability, and lightning manipulation. But here's the kicker. Nabu calls the shots, to an extent. If Nabu doesn't agree with what the iteration of Fate is doing, Fate's powers can be limited. In the initial Dr. Fate's case, Ken Nelson, if he was separated from the helm, he is significantly weakened but not entirely depowered, which is another thing. That aside, if Dr. Fate were to go full-blown homicidal or use his near-limitless sorcery powers to wreak havoc, there's a good chance that Nabu would prevent him from causing too much damage. Up next at 3, Havoc. Havoc is Cyclops' brother, a mutant with cosmic energy absorption and plasma discharge abilities. The waves of plasma energy can emanate from his body in all directions unless he channels it purposefully in a single direction. Generally, he wears a special containment suit, often with an indicator on his chest depicting how much cosmic radiation he has absorbed, and how much he has left within his cells. The concentration that's required of Havoc in releasing his energy in focused beams can be exhausting, especially over an extended period. And that's exactly why he's on this list. If he weren't focusing and allowing his plasmic energy just to shoot out of his body without a direction, his impact would be much more destructive. His plasma wave discharges can superheat and disintegrate objects or beings. So really, it is for the best that he holds back and concentrates so no one accidentally ends up dead. And at number 2, Professor X. Professor Charles Xavier is one of the most noble characters in Marvel's roster. First appearing in the X-Men issue 1 in 1963, this exceptionally powerful telepath is one of the most powerful psychics in the Marvel Universe. He has often sacrificed his own desires for the betterment of mutant kind, constantly striving for the greater good by promising a peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans. But there have been a good number of times where Xavier's more repressed, darker emotions have been released from him, causing devastating effects. Specifically in 1996, the sentient psionic entity Onslaught was created from the merging of a darker aspect of Xavier and Magneto's consciousness. During a battle between the X-Men and Magneto and his acolytes, Xavier used his telepathic abilities to shut down Magneto's mind, making him catatonic. The darkest aspect of Magneto's mind emerged and escaped into Xavier's subconscious, taking hold of Xavier's repressed darker nature until it grew into a persona of its own. And finally, in at number 1, Sentry. Sentry, aka Robert Reynolds, has a slew of abilities that makes him one of the most powerful characters in Marvel's universe. Or multiverse rather. This includes superhuman strength, speed and stamina, a regenerative healing ability, molecular manipulation, matter manipulation, he's invulnerable, telepathic, can bend time, shapeshift, can become invisible, can astral project, and of course he is immortal. And there's more too that we've listed a zillion times on this channel. While the source of his powers has changed over the years, initially he got his abilities from a super soldier-esque serum that moves his molecules an instant ahead of the current timeline. But here's the kicker. Because of his powers, he's got an entity within him that's a dark side effect. the eroded humanity within Sentry known as the Void, who has his own set of dark powers that include infinity tendrils that attack a victim's mind, impaling them with traumatic visions of the past, present, and future. But now we come to his restriction. In order to prevent the Void from causing catastrophic damage, Sentry worked with Dr. Doom and Reed Richards to wipe out not only his own memory, but the memory of the hero and his evil half from the entire Marvel Universe as a means of protecting it. Those are some real drastic measures.
Number 10. Hal Jordan / Green Lanterns. So the Green Lantern rings function based on the user's willpower. That and you have to charge them. But the charge is so narratively convenient that you don't need to worry about it too much. So the bearers can use the rings to create constructs, whatever their imaginations can conceive. But there is a built-in restriction, one that is now very present, and that is lethal force is not authorized. One has to break the Lantern code to kill. Hal knows, he killed the whole Corps, and then some. So one can get the ring to kill, but it'll send an alert and the rest of the Corps and the Guardians are going to be down on you. So best to hold back and find another solution to your problems. Talking to you, Hal. Yes, I know he was possessed by Parallax. If one does break the code, you pretty much have a limitless weapon at one's disposal. This concept was played with in Dawnbreaker from Metal Knight, the dark Batman who would use the Lantern ring that came to him to kill. This was from the Dark Multiverse stuff. He became pretty much unstoppable thanks to the strength of his will. You need a lot of focus and drive to wield a ring, so it's important to hold back on those murderous impulses. Number 9. Jaime Reyes. The Blue Beetle, the third one. More space and alien artifacts. Jaime Reyes first debuted as the Blue Beetle in Infinite Crisis number 5 back in 2006, but he had appeared as a character 2 issues prior. The story of the third Blue Beetle is a great legacy story. So the first Blue Beetle was Dan Garrett, and Cliff notes he found a mystical scarab that allowed him to fight crime. It was a retcon, initially he was powerless. This was at the very start of the Golden Age. Fast forward, he passed it on to his protege, the second Blue Beetle, Ted Cord, who was never able to get it to work. So instead he became a tech-based hero along the same theme. During Infinite Crisis, the scarab was reinvigorated and attached itself to Jaime Reyes. He was able to access it, and it formed into a protective suit around him with many capabilities. However, it became clear over time that this wasn't just some tech artifact. It began to talk to Jaime, to attempt to influence his actions, increase the amount of force he used, etc. This is more of an adaptation thing though. It turned out that the scarab was a part of the Reach, an alien force at war with the controllers. Depending upon continuity, the holding back Jaime is doing is of the scarab, making sure it uses appropriate force and doesn't overreact to situations in a desire to protect him. It's a symbiotic relationship, but not one anywhere near as intense as say Eddie Brock and Venom. It is grafted to his spine though. Ouch. Sadly, Rebirth has retconned pretty much all of this in one of the, in my opinion, missteps, and the scarab is magical again. Number 8. One Punch Man. Firstly, all of you stop being mean to Johnny about his pronunciation. It's different phonetic points, different languages. So the dilemma for very underestimated hero One Punch Man is that he is looking for a villain who he doesn't have to hold back against because he just trained so hard. He was so determined to be the very best, like no one ever was. To punch them was his real test, to beat them was his cause. Only well he is the best. He can KO and explode pretty much any villain with one punch. The punch doesn't even need to land, it's so powerful. Won't someone be there so that Saitama doesn't have to hold back? Make his dreams come true. This is a really fun satirical series, and I feel like we also need to start including heroes from My Hero Academia as well. Thoughts and feelings? I'm sure you'll let me know down below. Number 7. Jason Blood. Gone, gone, the form of man. Rise the demon, Etrigan. I hope you like rhymes, because if not, then oh man, Etrigan is gonna be rough for you. So these characters first appear in The Demon #1 back in 1972. The two are bound together, and Jack Kirby, their creator, had no interest in creating them, but did it because DC wanted horror characters, and he was like, okay fine, here's a demon. There have been some changes in origin, but all in all, it's Merlin who binds Jason and Etrigan together, and the struggle has been real ever since. Jason isn't thrilled about being bound to a demon, and often works hard to live his life without summoning Etrigan at all, and is quite annoyed when some of his magical acquaintances, looking at you Constantine, will force him out. This is because there are some situations where Etrigan's strength and powers are required, but Jason is a skilled sorcerer, so he can avoid having to summon Etrigan for a good while if he's really in a snit. Why doesn't he want him? Well, Etrigan is a sadomasochist and has been known to go too far and torment people because he enjoys it. The two eventually find an even keel and come to respect each other. Etrigan has been largely dormant, but there's rumors about Justice League Dark, so maybe we'll see more of Jason Blood soon. It's a great name.
Number 6. Wonder Woman. We have seen what happens when Wonder Woman stops holding back, and it's not pretty, I'm gonna tell you that. Whether we are talking about emotionally with her giving into a well of despair, or physically with her causing the mass destruction of the entire planet as a result of a fight against Superman. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse, War of the Gods, her giving in emotionally resulted in her being overtaken by Hecate, who she had previously trapped in her subconscious, initially preventing Hecate from possessing her. However, after the destruction of Themyscira and the death of her sisters, her fellow Amazons, and her mother, Diana ends up losing hope, and thereby loses control over herself. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, we learn of how Wonder Woman giving into her rage and removing her bracelets, which in this story hold back Diana's power, results in the destruction of the planet. Even in the main continuity, it's actually been suggested that Diana is much more powerful than she lets on, and this is likely because without holding back, she could actually cause major damage and destruction to the world around her and people in it. Number 5. Storm. Storm has demonstrated restraint on multiple occasions when facing her enemies, and has proven time and time again how much of a badass she is in the comics. Recently, during the AXE Judgment Day event, Storm was one of the few people to survive Uranos' initial attack on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. This went down when Storm was the acting regent of Arakko, the planet and nation's leader. Storm is the only person I believe to have actually sat on both the Great Ring of Arakko and the Quiet Council of Krakoa at the same time, and she made this work for actually a pretty good while. In order to get her seat, she actually had to defeat the previous regent who held the seat of All Around Us, that's the name of the seat that she holds, Nameless, the shapeshifter queen. While Storm bested Nameless, she refused to kill her opponent, preferring to hold back and allow Nameless to live, forcing Nameless to actually curse Storm and choose to take their own life rather than simply admitting defeat. Number 4. Black Bolt. Black Bolt is a character who is so powerful, half the time just the threat of him using his power is enough to stop those who oppose him from basically messing with him. Black Bolt's power first manifested at birth, as his mother and father exposed him to Terrigenesis before he was even born as part of an experiment to see, kind of what that would do. This, along with his immensely powerful genetic makeup, resulted in him being born as one of the most powerful Inhumans ever. Black Bolt would end up being kept in isolation for most of his childhood and early life as a result of the sheer power that he possessed. He literally couldn't even just run around and be a kid. No, too powerful. His powers are related to the speech center of his brain and his ability to harness electrons. Using both, he possesses an extremely powerful voice, with just a whisper often being enough to harm those who stand against him. As it stands, Black Bolt usually communicates telepathically, although not psionic himself, or more often with his own specific form of sign language. Number 3. Icon. Icon has been shown to be even more powerful than Superman on occasion, with Superman at one point remarking that being hit by Icon was the hardest that he'd ever been hit. The two have fought multiple times against one another in the comics, even way back when Clark had his long hair. Oh, I miss his long, luscious locks. At one point they end up fighting in the 2006 Justice League of America series in issue 28, but here it's all a show. So there's no real victor since they are kind of just pretending to fight here. And we have to expect that Icon was holding back somewhat here. Sure, he wanted to make the fight appear convincing, but he didn't actually intend to hurt Superman, which implies that he wasn't even using his full force here, as he likely wouldn't need to go hard to sell a fight to onlookers. With that reasoning, not only have we literally seen Icon hold back, but it also means that the hero, now from DC's Milestone imprint, might actually have to hold back even more than some of the most powerful heroes from DC's mainline, which is pretty wild to consider. Number 2. Magik. Magik is a hero that often gets left out of lists like this, so I want to thank Michael Sheehan in the comments from our part 1 video for suggesting that I add her to this video. Truly, she is a superhero who constantly has to hold back, lest she threaten the existence of the world and possibly the universe. Magik isn't just a straight up hero, she's complicated. She also has a darker side known as Darkchild that she often has to keep contained. And that's what I love about her complexity. She also has a ton of trauma in her life that she constantly has to confront and deal with. Number 1. Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan has to be one of the ultimate heroes for needing to hold back. Dr. Manhattan is insanely powerful, and perhaps this is why he generally prefers to stay out of the affairs of mortal beings. Well, that and the fact that he likely doesn't much care for, humans. He is a reality warper, and in fact is one of the folks, I would argue, in current lore the main folk, responsible for the New 52 continuity reset. As such, Dr. Manhattan constantly holds back, despite the fact that he could reset the universe on the daily, destroy it, or completely fix everything. Instead of doing any of this stuff though, he prefers to take more of a watcher role, only getting involved when when he really feels it's necessary or has some strong desire to do so, which isn't very often. Number 10. Cyclops. While Cyclops might not be as powerful as some of the others on this list, he pretty much perfectly sums up the idea of a hero who has to hold back his power in order to fight. I mean, that's literally what his costume is for, really. Well, other than that sweet X-Men suit. That is just so we know what team he's fighting alongside. But when it comes to his visor, that is straight up being used to better control and restrain his powers, so that he isn't just optic blasting everyone he looks at or comes up against into next week. Additionally, Cyclops doesn't just use his visor, but also uses his gloves to do this. In his gloves are little buttons that Cyclops can basically push to control the visor, allowing him to open it more or less and change the angle at which it will emit his optic blasts. This is also why Cyclops is known as a master of trigonometry. He needs this knowledge so that he can best utilize his optic blasts, knowing exactly how and when to fire them, and with how much intensity in order to achieve whatever the fight calls for. So whether it's a giant full frontal blast or something a little bit more subtle, Cyclops is always prepared for each and every occasion, as long as he has his trig knowledge intact and his visor and his gloves with him. Since the character first debuted, his powers and their immense strength are something that have also been shown as bothering and plaguing this character, with him even believing that Jean could actually never love him because of his uncontrollable optic blasts. How could she ever love me? I have to wear rose quartz glasses all the time. It's not that big of a deal, psych. Just chill. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Number 9. Starfire. Starfire is a character who is immensely powerful, and honestly, we don't talk about her enough on this channel. It's been a minute since we talked about Kory, but let's get into it. The Teen Titans in general are an immensely powerful team, and now that they're no longer teens and are fully grown adults, being known simply as the Titans, they're even more powerful than they once were. Being in control of superpowers as an adult superhero is really, I think, all about knowing when to hold back. Over time, characters have a tendency to only get more powerful and more experienced with age, and Starfire is no exception. In the comics, even pre-Flashpoint Starfire in a fight against Blackfire acknowledges that she is indeed her sister's equal in terms of her power and prowess, saying that the only reason that she has not beaten her sister is because they have never fought as equals, despite being equal to one another. And her sister responds by saying that due to Starfire's caring nature, Kory often holds back, which is basically her weakness. At least, that's how Blackfire sees it. While Blackfire might see this as a weakness, I'm sure Starfire would actually see it as a strength, as it is also what makes her a hero. Sometimes in order to be a hero, you have to know when to restrain yourself, you know what I mean? Number 8. Gentle. Gentle is such a great mutant hero, one we honestly do not talk enough about. His power is so great that it's believed using it could actually result in him losing his life. As a result, Gentle was given vibranium tattoos, which allow him to better contain and control his powers. His powers grant him augmented strength. Despite his mutant name, Gentle can actually become insanely muscular, increasing in size and mass, and we don't actually know the limits of his powers yet, which is why they're also so dangerous. Using them is also really hard on Nesno's body, which could result in his death. Gentle is a hero who, while also a citizen of Krakoa now, is also known for his Wakandan heritage, being actually part Wakandan and part Russian based on his parents' heritage. Initially, it was believed that using his power also caused him great pain and actually resulted in seizures, but we later learned that this was actually more psychological. The vibranium tattoos were therefore helpful for him in regards to using his powers, but were also helpful in the way that they seemed to help lessen his pain. Gentle was also recently a candidate for the X-Men, and one of the mutants you could vote to have elected to the team. He didn't get chosen, but I honestly hope he does get to join the main team in the future, as he's a really neat and unique hero and character. Number 7. The Flash. The Flash might seem like a weird pick for this list, especially as up to this point we've mostly been focusing on characters who have something physical or mental that forces them to hold back their power set. But with the Flash, it's actually all about how powerful he is. He is, I would say, too powerful, which is the issue, especially in regards to his ability to time travel. While Barry Allen as the Flash has traveled back in time and changed things only to learn afterwards of how this was kind of an awful mistake, upturning the entire universe as a result of the change he'd made to basically save his mother, Wally West has seemingly learned from his predecessor's mistakes. For that reason, Wally actually prefers not to get involved when it comes to time travel. He knows that to do so could possibly break the universe, and so has a tendency to be more reserved and much more careful when it comes to racing through the time stream. And even when his friend Hunter Zolomon had begged Wally to use his power to help reverse his paralysis by traveling back in time to prevent it, Wally actually refused. This is what prompted Hunter to become the villain known as Zoom, believing that Wally simply wouldn't help him because he'd just not known enough tragedy in his life, as Hunter had. Zoom believed that in order to make Wally as the Flash a better hero, he would actually have to make him suffer.
Number 6. Quake. Daisy Johnson is the daughter of the villain Mr. Hyde and a woman with the Inhuman gene. This resulted in her developing the ability to manipulate vibrations. She can use these for a variety of purposes, like causing earthquakes, hence the name Quake. She can also use these powers on a more micro level, such as when she took on the Omega level mutant Magneto and managed to vibrate his brain until he fell unconscious in New Avengers number 20. On another occasion, when Wolverine was having one of his famous temper tantrums and attacked Nick Fury, she was able to use her vibration powers to cause his heart to explode. So she has the power to take on some of the most notoriously dangerous characters in the Marvel Universe. In fact, she is so powerful that she actually needs to be really careful about how she uses her powers. Obviously, earthquakes can cause a huge amount of collateral damage, so she needs to be careful of that. But the best example of these powers left unchecked is from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show, where Glenn Talbot gets Quake's powers in an alternate timeline and uses them to destroy the planet. So yeah, she needs to be careful. Number 5. Gambit. Remy LeBeau is a powerful and popular member of the X-Men with the ability to tap into an item's potential kinetic energy, making it a dangerous and explosive weapon. He most often uses smaller items like a deck of playing cards, which he will then throw at his enemies. The only real limit on these powers is that he needs to make direct skin contact with whatever item he's charging, hence the cool fingerless gloves. Oh, and also the amount of time it takes him to charge the object, with larger objects taking longer. He also has the ability to hypnotically charm people, making them more likely to do what he wants. Before he was a member of the X-Men, he was a master thief, but found that he was having trouble controlling his powers, causing him to seek out the help of Mr. Sinister, who gave Gambit a surgery removing part of his brain in order to dampen his powers and make them more manageable. So, while there may be other heroes on this list who are more powerful, none of them took such extreme measures to hold themselves back for the safety of others. Number 4. Northstar.
Oh, Andrew, you talk about Alpha Flight on almost every list. Why don't you talk about more popular teams?
Well, I'll tell you, it's because they're awesome. And because I spent a lot of money collecting every appearance of Alpha Flight over the pandemic, including the issue in Volume 2 that features the first appearance of Big Hero 6, which was a real pain in the butt to find. And talking about them in a work video makes that a tax write-off. Plus, it's my list, and you're literally in my home right now, so I'm gonna talk about who I want to talk about. Jean-Paul Bouvier is the fastest mutant in the Marvel Universe, since Quicksilver isn't a mutant anymore. Northstar is capable of reaching incredible speeds when running or flying. He has a twin sister named Aurora, who is also fast and able to fly, but though she has a greater endurance than her brother, he is the faster of the two. In X-Factor Volume 4, Number 7, Northstar and fellow speedster Tommy Shepard are comparing top speeds, and JP reveals that his top speed is 189,299 miles per second, which makes him faster than the speed of light. But he has a very good reason for not reaching his full speed. As he explains to Tommy, that would destroy everything in my path. I could garrote the world in half with one lap if I wished it. It would destroy me physically, I mean, not emotionally. I can't breathe at that point because I've created a vacuum and my organs are getting crushed, my bones pulverized into dust. So yeah, Northstar is holding back for good reason. Number 3, Captain Atom. Captain Atom was originally a Charlton Comics character, the same way that Shazam used to be. DC Comics eventually purchased Charlton's collection of heroes, and as a result, he was introduced into the DC universe. In the DC retelling of his origin, Nathaniel Atom was a man sentenced to death for treason. He was offered the opportunity to instead sign up for an experiment designed to test the structural integrity of an alien metal. To test this, they placed Adam in a metal egg and then blasted it with a nuclear explosion. He was vaporized, but much like the Watchmen character he inspired, Dr. Manhattan, he was reconstituted with the metal now covering his skin. Captain Atom can tap into the quantum field and convert the energy into powerful blasts. He can also generate and manipulate matter, such as when he transformed Green Arrow's arrows into butterflies. Captain Atom has to be very careful with his powers, as he is essentially a walking nuke. When he uses his upper power levels, he will start to leak radiation, and if his metal skin is ruptured, he risks detonating like an atomic bomb and destroying whatever city he's in. Number 2, Scarlet Witch. So, Scarlet Witch is one of the most crazy powerful people in the Marvel Universe. One time, she was able to rewrite reality so that mutants were the dominant species on the planet and humans the minority. When Magneto ticked her off, she decided to rewrite reality again, taking away something like 99% of the world's mutant powers by simply saying, no more mutants. She could do that again anytime she wants. I really don't think I need to say anything else on the subject. Number 1, Spider-Man. When I was checking out the previous 2 videos that Amanda did on this subject, which you should of course check out because they're great and also not filmed in an apartment, but I was shocked to learn that Spider-Man didn't make the cut on either installment. So even though he may not be holding back as much as some of the others on this list, I decided to give him the top spot here. Spider-Man is a powerful hero, being able to climb walls, swing from webs, and use his spider sense to avoid danger. But what we're talking about here is his super strength. He can lift several tons at once, as he infamously did in Amazing Spider-Man number 33, when Dr. Octopus trapped him under loads of heavy machinery. But when you have that level of strength, and also have a rule against killing, you have to make sure you pull your punches to avoid taking someone's head off. This was discovered by Doc Ock when he took over Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man. In one of his first adventures as the new Spidey, Ock fought the Scorpion, and when he punched the Scorpion in the jaw flew clean off. As Doc put it, never knew this body held so much power. All these years, Parker must have been holding back. That really must have made him rethink every time Spider-Man punched him and how that could have turned out.
Number 10, Dr. Fate. So here's the thing with Dr. Fate. Typically the character is not just one character, but 2 inhabiting one body. This is what the Helm of Fate actually represents, the connection of Dr. Fate to Naboo, the Lord of Order, which is where Kent Nelson originally got his powers and his knowledge from. Of course, Kent Nelson also has power separate from his appearance as Dr. Fate. He is, after all, a supremely skilled and knowledgeable magic user in his own right, thanks to years of training. However, with Dr. Fate really in essence being kind of 2 people combined, the Lord of Order Naboo and Naboo's host, in this case we're talking about Kent Nelson, these 2 do not always agree on how best to deal with an enemy or potentially catastrophic events. Case in point in Justice League Dark, when Naboo takes control of Kent's body against his will, only for him to later be freed of Naboo's influence and refuse to basically use the power of the helm, instead choosing to keep Naboo trapped within it, because Kent knows, well, if I try to work with Naboo, I'm probably gonna get possessed again. This guy's kind of being a little evil right now. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe? I know there are many of you that are not subscribed, so do it. Click the button. Do it. Number 9, Cyborg. In the Doom Patrol series, we literally saw just how powerful Cyborg is when it comes to using him as a pawn and manipulating him into attacking his own father. Mr. Nobody managed to trick Cyborg and ended up showing just how much potential he has when it comes to his ability to do harm. Cyborg actually would make probably a pretty great villain, to be honest, which is creepy. Cyborg in general usually has to be careful when fighting against enemies because he is super strong. In the comics and other media, he has also been portrayed as being in essence a master hacker, and as a result constantly decides to hold back rather than, just use his hacking skills to manipulate the world, which would kind of be, and sometimes that would be a little insidious. In the Snyder Cut, it's even alluded to that Cyborg is actually actually one of the most powerful people in the Justice League, with him being able to control all the banks and bank accounts of the world if he wanted. That's just part of what we get to see. Here he is shown as pretty much having access to everything technological, but being someone who chooses to use this power reluctantly and responsibly, because he is a hero. Honestly, when it comes to powerhouses in the comics who are capable of doing more, but choose to hold back, knowing that unleashing the full force of their power could be pretty dangerous, Cyborg is actually one of the best examples, even though some might not fully comprehend or accept him as the powerhouse he is. But Vic definitely deserves that. Number 8. Sunspot. Sunspot is one of my favorite heroes when it comes to those who have to hold their power back. I mean, at one point, his power was at risk of killing him, guys. After being shot in the head, he was forced to wear a headband to help regulate his powers, as he lost control of them, somewhat, and left unchecked they could easily kill him. Sunspot's headband would regulate his powers, thereby by literally holding back and balancing his powers for him. And we see just how necessary this is when Bobby, who at the time was known as Citizen V, decides to throw caution to the wind, removing his regulator headband to prove that he is indeed one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, while also obviously fighting to save the world by using his power to keep the world engine running, putting his life on the line. Number 7. Sentry. EJ Graham in the comments for the part 1 of this video was considering suggesting Sentry for a potential part 2. Ultimately though, he decided against suggesting that perhaps Sentry doesn't hold back, and instead often simply gets written out of Marvel Comics because he's too overpowered. I would argue that him both being written out / killed off because he's too powerful, and him having to hold back because he is too powerful, are actually both true. Sentry does every now and then go in guns a-blazing, with him ripping people in half kind of becoming a weird, every so often semi-regular occurrence. However, I will also say that more often than not, we've actually seen Sentry hold back his powers and express restraint, especially when you consider he agreed to wipe his own mind and the minds of everyone else on Earth of his superheroic existence just to protect them from the evil villain, the Void, who is basically Sentry's villainous alter ego he was made to believe that he'd always had after being brainwashed by Mastermind. Number 6. Hellstrom. Hellstrom is actually someone who is similar to another character on this list in regards to his heritage, although the other character I'm comparing him to here is actually not from Marvel, but stay tuned for more on that. Because this point is all about Damon Hellstrom, or Hellstorm, depending on his persona and his mood. Hellstrom is said to be the son of Satan, although it is unknown up to this point if his father is really the true devil or just one of the many demons posing as the devil in the Marvel Universe. Hellstrom as such has 2 different personas within him, one that is inherently more good and heroic, and another that is straight up or on the verge of being evil, more influenced by his father's heritage. Sometimes these 2 personas are kind of given different names as well, Hellstrom or Hellstorm depending on which persona he is leaning more towards at the time. Sometimes Hellstrom is actually only spelled with one L, and other times he's used these names to sort of like protect his identity, although they are both super similar, so I don't really fully understand how that's supposed to fool anyone. Hellstrom has often struggled with unleashing the full force of his power, and sometimes, in fact I would say often, regrets its ties to hell and the darkness that lies within him. Number 5. Shazam. Shazam, or Captain Marvel as some still refer to him today, is one of the most powerful heroes DC has, and in fact some would argue that when it comes to his fights and contests with Superman, it is he, not Superman, who is often the one who would need to hold back. This is because Shazam's powers come from the gods, and some actually say this is because his powers are kinda magical. The limitless wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, stamina of Atlas, power and omnipotence of Zeus, courage of Achilles, and speed of Mercury. There is really no limit, or there shouldn't be, to what he can do, and it is because of this sheer power and strength that Shazam often needs to hold back when fighting against his enemies as well. You could also add in the fact that it is Billy Batson's kind heart that often encourages him to hold back against his enemies, preferring to not be so brutal with his enemies or his opponents. I mean, especially if they are his friends or people he looks up to, because, you know, even heroes sometimes fight each other, like in a fight against Supes. At one point, Superman even played host to Captain Marvel and actually marveled at his sheer power. So, you know you're probably going to need to hold back when you're like wowing Superman with your power levels. Number 4. Blue Marvel. If you are powerful enough to knock out Hulk and live to tell the tale, even if he possibly is maybe a less stronger version of the Hulk from the Ultimate Universe, then you probably need to rein in your powers almost all the time. Blue Marvel's powers come from him being a scientist and being forever changed by an experiment gone wrong. Adam Brashear was the project lead on an experimental attempt to manipulate and utilize antimatter. When the negative reactor exploded, it transformed Adam into, in essence, what he was trying to create. He became an antimatter reactor, harnessing antimatter, which basically powered his amazing newfound abilities. Number 3. Superman. I mean, Superman is one of the strongest superheroes DC has to offer. He packs a mean punch, and I mean a mean punch. He often holds back, and not just in regards to strength and holding back actual force, but also in terms of his morality. Superman has a very strong moral code. He won't even hit someone in the back if their back is turned to him. That's how passionate he is about fighting fair. He doesn't hit his opponents when they're down, and he doesn't kill, even though he could very easily permanently defeat his opponents by just straight up ending them. This just isn't Superman's style, and honestly, it's what most people love and respect about Superman. To use his power to annihilate his opponents would actually kind of be sinking to their level. In fact, in realities where he has chosen not to hold back, like Injustice, where he brutally murders the Joker in response to him destroying Metropolis, killing his BFF Jimmy Olsen, and manipulating Superman into killing Lois, Clark becomes a straight up villain and a brutal dictator, which is why he chooses to hold back more often than not in the comics, because he is aware of how power can easily corrupt people. I mean, to be honest, a lot of his villains are people who allow themselves to become corrupted by great power, whether or not they're aware of that. Number 2. Hulk. To say that the Hulk is the strongest there is really not an overstatement. Not only the strongest, but also just one of the most indestructible heroes out there. After all, Hulk is also now immortal, and kinda has been the whole time. And as a result of this, is a character that you do not want to face in a fight. The good news is that Hulk typically doesn't want to kill people, and so he generally does hold back in fights, unless he's going up against someone, you know, that's just about as indestructible as he is. Like, he might not hold back as much when he's fighting someone like the Thing. There are a few reasons that this happens when it comes to Hulk holding back. One, Hulk has actually exhibited he himself has morals. Not all Hulk personas are like this. I mean, look at his alternate version, Maestro, from the future. This version of the Hulk is more devoid of morals and is therefore willing to use all of his strength and power to devastating degrees. The other reason Hulk is often holding back actually has to do with the other persona that's in there with him at the time, Bruce Banner. It's been alluded to before that Bruce can act at times like the Hulk's conscience, but then again, it's also been suggested that Hulk actually might be Bruce's conscience, so kinda depends on the story you're reading as to who is the more heroic between those two personas. Number 1. Raven. Raven is another character that basically sums up the idea of a person who has to hold back and really has no choice in that matter. I mean, we've seen what happens when Raven fully lets go, and it's deadly. Raven in general has to hold back her power in regards to letting herself be fueled by emotion, which is why she generally remains extremely detached. Which also makes her a great counterbalance to someone like Starfire on the Teen Titans team. While Starfire's issue when it comes to holding back is that she has too much emotion, too much empathy for those around her, Raven often prefers to stay closed off from those emotions, knowing that with them could come great power, but at the risk of easily losing control. This is a huge issue for Raven considering her heritage. Raven is related to the demon Trigon, who is immensely powerful and is a version of Satan in essence in the DC universe. While Trigon is her father, he is also her arch nemesis, which means she has to be careful when it comes to possibly opening herself up to his influence at all, as it can and has in the past turned Raven into an extremely dangerous and powerful supervillain. One that could like literally end worlds, so yeah. Number 10. The Beast. The blue bouncing beast is more known for his super intellect than his super strength, although really super strength is his real mutant ability. His brute strength, durability, and super dexterity are the powers that he was granted by his mutation. Though why do we know him more for his intellect? Beast prefers to stay out of fighting when it can be avoided, and is often recognized as an academic and pacifist. Part of the reason he holds back when he is fighting probably comes back to those beliefs, as well as his fear of his more animal nature. The times that he is held back when it comes to fighting probably has to do with a few events following his transformation into his beast-like form. As you'll recall, he didn't always look as he does. He used to look like an almost completely normal human, and then he was also a grey beast for a while. Soon after he was transformed, he was drugged and hunted by Kraven, causing him to resort to a feral-like state. He almost killed Kraven near the end of the story, and later in the comics was manipulated into believing that he'd killed Iron Man. Both events were like a living nightmare for the mostly peaceful Hank. Number 9. Deku. When Deku from My Hero Academia receives his All-for-One quirk from All Might, he is forced to hold back his powers, as using them at full strength would destroy him. The power of All-for-One basically allows him to store up energy and then release it in one superhuman and often explosive blast. He must train and use the power carefully or risk damaging his entire body. Therefore, he carefully channels the power and controls the percentage of output to avoid injury to himself. And even with reducing it as much as he does and controlling it, his use of the power still causes his hand and fingers, which he channels the power through, to become disfigured. Number 8. Cyclops. The proof is in the pudding with Cyclops, who is forced to hold back his powers simply because he cannot really fully control them. His laser eyes, sorry friends, I'm just kidding, his optic blasts need to be kept in check, or he would just be blowing up stuff left, right, and center. Scott actually has 2 separate ruby quartz visors, one that helps him control his optic blasts and one that he wears when sleeping that completely contains these blasts. And if you don't believe that his powers need to be held back, just look at the evidence. Anytime he loses his visor in the comics or any other media involving the loss of his visor, usually results in him having to close his eyes to protect people. Unless Emma Frost is around to help him have control over this ability, of course. Number 7. Sunspot. Being able to convert solar energy into strength may not seem like it is something that is insanely powerful, but there was a time in the comics that Sunspot almost killed himself while doing this. Yeah, after losing control of his powers as the result of an injury, Roberto was forced to use a regulator headband to help him gain control of his abilities again. He was often depicted wearing the headband in the comics to help him limit the risk of losing control. And when he chose to ditch his regulator band in an attempt to access the full potential of his powers, he was actually warned that this would likely kill him. Fortunately, he managed to survive, but the risk was still very much there. At his full strength, Sunspot was even referred to as the strongest Avenger. Granted, this was Roberto himself talking, who is known for being kind of full of himself, so.
Number 6. Jubilee. Okay, Jubilee is not weak, and she never really was. Her powers were always more than fireworks, even if she herself does describe them that way. Where a lot of the she's useless comes from is the 90s animated series, where she would consistently be ineffectual with her attacks just bouncing off of things like sentinels. However, Jubilee actually has enormous potential. Emma Frost has noted that she has the potential to detonate matter at a subatomic level because her power set is that she generates pyrotechnic energy plasmoids. So in short, she could be a walking nuclear bomb. What's holding her back? Well, mental blocks really. She needs to hold back because, well, she could destroy everything, but she was held back by her inability to conceive of wielding that much power. She was always surprised when she leveled up. It's a good thing Jubilee holds back, because with all these people calling her useless, maybe one day she'll just snap. Number 5. Storm. You all have been asking for Storm since part 1. You have been scandalized that she wasn't on these lists. Well, she's here now. She first appeared in Giant X-Men #1 back in 1975. She was part of the big X-Men relaunch with a new lineup that re-galvanized the books. The X-Men actually didn't do that well in the 60s, it's only retroactively that people went back and appreciated it. Storm is an Omega level mutant, officially now thanks to House of X. When most people think of her, they think, oh, weather control. But it's so much more than making it rain. She can start tempest, earth-shattering storms, and also manipulate weather on a cosmic level, cosmic storms. And also, like Magneto, she can also mess with the electromagnetic current. Storm doesn't use her full potential because if she did, she would destroy the world. She's only limited by the strength and will of her body, but with all that training, generating a mega earth-ending level storm shouldn't be too difficult. So yeah, Storm holds back because she doesn't want to destroy the Earth. She lives here too. Also, random question. Wolverine in Storm or Black Panther in Storm? Let me know. Number 4, Spider-Man. He's another one that all of you have been clamoring for, and fair is fair, he's a lot more powerful than he appears, or than people give him credit for. Now when people go down the list of Peter's abilities, they often leave super strength down to the bottom, or off entirely. Instead, the attention goes to the wall crawling or the spider sense. But Peter is very strong, and he constantly has to restrain himself from really hurting people, including the villains he's fighting. He can punch Jaws clean off, but he takes with great power comes great responsibility seriously. Don't mess with Spider-Man. Just because he's wiry and doesn't have the bulk, people think, oh, he can't do anything, just puny Parker. Well, that's how you get thrown through a window. Just ask Wolverine. Number 3, the Hulk. How can we keep making these and not talk about Bruce Banner and the Hulk? That's what Bruce has been doing since he became the Hulk. He first appeared in The Incredible Hulk #1 back in 1962. After being bombarded by gamma radiation, when angered or stressed, Bruce Banner transforms into the Hulk, initially a mindless monster. Over time, the Hulk has developed into being his own being, separate from Banner, which has led to even more problems as the two try to reconcile their joint existence. It's gotten even worse than the Immortal Hulk, with poor dead Banner being dragged along by the still living Hulk. So this is a relationship that has changed, but everyone remembers the classic tale of Banner hiding out from the world because any little trigger could set him off and unleash the beast within. A man constantly battling against his own fears, doing nothing but holding back, essentially. Side note, there's one issue where She-Hulk tries to say that her life is worse than his, even though she's a sexy lawyer that everyone likes, or was a sexy lawyer. Recently she fought for her right to be ugly. Keeping up with comics. Number 2, Invincible. Going back to Kirkman's superhero epic following the life and times of Invincible, aka Marcus Grayson, no relation at all to Dick Grayson. Rick Grayson is dead to me. Invincible is the son of Omni-Man and half Viltrumite. He becomes one of the premier defenders of Earth after the betrayal of his father and the reveal that he was bred to be a weapon to conquer the world. He is incredibly strong, and at first he isn't even aware how much. His training with his father was just coming to a close when everything went down. If he doesn't hold back, he'll just beat his enemies into a bloody pulp, and he has on multiple occasions. Just a bloody mess, complete poundage. A level of gore that is heightened by the bright, happy way the books are drawn. Invincible would go on to become the leader of the Viltrumite Empire, so watch out. So far his reign has lasted centuries. Number 1, Raven. You knew she was coming, you were waiting. Raven is a core member of the new Teen Titans, the result of a forceful coupling between the demon Trigon and her mother Angela Roth. She fled in horror about what had happened, and took her daughter to the alternate dimension of Azarath, where she spent her life trying to teach Raven to suppress her emotions and master her control, a difficult task as Raven is also an empath. She hid her parentage from her for a while in hopes that with proper training she would never be able to access the dark emotion-fueled part of herself, but ultimately she failed. When Raven turned 18, she tried to prevent her father from crossing into Azarath. She is locked in battle with her father and the dark aspects of her nature. Raven has let go before, with disastrous results, far worse than ruining Nightwing and Starfire's wedding, which did happen. While she is a healer, she possesses many of her father's powers and traits and can manipulate darkness. Raven must constantly hold her emotions in check and not be overwhelmed by others, or also her father's forces, lest she give him what he wants and enslave the world. Definitely number 1 worthy.
At number 10 is Magneto. Magneto wields some serious power. You see, his thing is manipulating metals like they're puppets on a string. From crushing the Avengers to outsmarting other heroes, he's a serious force to be reckoned with. But here's the kicker. His ability to tweak electromagnetic energy is on a whole nother level. Magneto isn't just about playing with metal. In multiple occasions, he talks big game about being able to control Earth's magnetic poles. And now that's a big deal, because messing up with those poles could mean some trouble for literally everybody on the planet. He's threatened to flip Earth's magnetic switch, which would cause chaos globally. But G never actually goes all the way with it. Instead, he dangles this terrifying possibility like a threat to get what he wants, so he's essentially a bad guy with enough power to shake up the entire world big time. At number 9 is Gorr the God Butcher. Gorr the God Butcher, as portrayed in the comics, stands tall as one of Thor's most fiercest foes. This guy, Gorr, gives Thor a serious run for money. He doesn't just give Thor a hard time, he straight up beats him in almost every single showdown. I mean, there's this one showdown where Thor takes on 3 different versions of Thor and still comes out on top. You see, Thor never actually defeated Gorr in a fair fight. Not a single time. Every time it looks like Thor wins, it's either because he talks Thor down with some talk no jutsu, or gets help from somebody else with a team takedown assist. So Gorr remains undefeated against Thor in a one-on-one showdown. Just think about that. Gorr is undefeated against Thor. And it's not just Thor either, he's even taken down Celestials with that Necro Sword. Now in the movie Thor Love and Thunder, they kinda toned Gorr down a bit. Gorr's dark and deep storyline clashed with the movie's kind of fun and funny tone. Christian Bale played Gore well, but the character didn't get to shine as much as he could have. He could have been one of the top villains in the Marvel movies, but didn't really quite happen with his whole ending in the movie, which is kind of a shame, really. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing the notification bell. It's free, it helps us out, and I really appreciate it. At number 8 is Sandman. Flint Marko, better known as Sandman, might not be the first villain to pop up in your head when thinking about Spidey's most amazing foes, but back in the day, he was a big deal in the Amazing Spider-Man, a founding member of the Sinister Six, as he took center stage as the main baddie. But as time passed, folks started to see him as kinda weak. I mean, a guy made of sand doesn't really sound too scary, right? But Sandman's powers are no joke. He can get as hard as concrete or let things pass right through him, and that makes him a nightmare to fight. Remember Spider-Man 3? Sandman was meant to be the big bad for that movie before the studio pushed for Venom. And in Marvel's Zombies, he wrecked an alternate Spider-Man with ease and pushed him to his limit. At number 7 is Galactus, one of Marvel's big guns, faced off against the big shot Celestials in a showdown that rocked the comics. Specifically Fantastic Four number 602, Galactus barges into an interstellar brawl among the Kree Empire, the Inhumans, and the Annihilation Wave, situation that could wreak havoc for our entire solar system. The Fantastic Four ropes him in to help, and Galactus steps up, taking on the Kree with ease. Then boom! 4 Celestials from Earth 2480 crash the party. Galactus squares up, showing that he's not a pushover, and they gang up on him, but Galactus gives back as good as he gets, offing one of them. But then 3 of the Celestials merge into a Super Celestial and zap Galactus, and it looks like it's a game over. Enter an adult Franklin Richards from the future, who takes down one Celestial but can't handle the others. And in a twist, Franklin Richards powers up Galactus, who comes back roaring, and with newfound strength, Galactus tears through the Celestial in half, proving his might. Now, even though Galactus needed help against the merged Celestials, he was a one-man wrecking crew otherwise. Taking down 2 Celestials bare-handedly solidifies him as Marvel's powerhouse.
Number 6. Wonder Woman. An insanely powerful superhero, Wonder Woman's abilities appear almost limitless. She has super breath, is insanely strong, is somewhat telepathic, can fly, and even sometimes can breathe underwater. Does anyone remember when the comics told us she had gills? Weird. Granted, these abilities are surprisingly not her own really, as they are gifts from the gods. But still, one cannot deny that Wonder Woman is pretty much unstoppable. So what is she holding back? Apparently, the full strength of her powers as a demi-goddess. Yep. The Wonder Woman we see in the comics isn't even all that she could be. It has constantly been established that her bracelets of submission are used to keep her powers in check and prevent her from becoming too OP. Number 5. Jean Grey. Another strong woman who has been classified as one of the strongest telepaths in the world, an Omega level mutant who also has telekinetic abilities. You might be thinking that I'm gonna go down one of my favorite paths here with Jean and talk about Phoenix and Dark Phoenix and self-control in regards to those entities that Jean becomes. You'd be wrong. In fact, Jean had to have the full potential locked away from her from a very young age. When she first came to Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, Professor Xavier actually put up psychic shields in her mind, recognizing she was not yet prepared to handle the full potential of her power, as it could put her and others at risk. Number 4. Quicksilver. What happens when you go even faster than the fastest man on Earth? That is something Quicksilver should never venture to answer, and after the events of No Surrender, I'm sure he learned just that. Quicksilver is an arrogant hero who sometimes plays villain and who normally indulges very much in his powers. The rate at which he can travel allows him to dash across oceans, walk on water, dodge bullets, and even time travel. However, during the Avengers No Surrender event, he traveled too fast, even for himself, and seemed to find out why restraining one's powers can be a good thing. In his own series following the comic book event called Quicksilver No Surrender, he seems to get stuck somewhere between time and space, in some kind of weird time-space limbo. The series itself is beautiful, and you should read it. It also involves a lot of self-reflection on Quicksilver's part, but besides that, it also serves to show us why Quicksilver holding back from traveling beyond the fastest he can is a good idea. Number 3. Rogue. You asked for more Rogue from me, and you got her. Coming in at our number 3 spot, Rogue is a hero who has always wanted to hold back. In fact, she is often portrayed as not even wanting to have her powers at all, even sometimes attempting to seek out a cure. The traumatizing experience of her first kiss with Cody Robbins, resulting in him ending up in a coma, has always kind of caused her to wish that she was different and, didn't have powers. She does her best to control, limit, and hold back her powers, being careful not to make physical contact with loved ones, and even when fighting, to limit the physical contact she does make with enemies. Number 2. Adam Warlock. Cosmic superhero Adam Warlock has been presented as one of the few people in the Marvel Universe strong enough to wield the Infinity Gauntlet. While he was persuaded to dismantle it after being convinced that it was too much power for any one person to control, the fact remains that his time on Earth and in space has allowed him to go on adventures which have ended up granting him an off-the-charts level of powers in the comics. Still, he does not often use all his power. Why? After using all his power to combine 2 timelines to close a fault created by one of the Inhumans' T-bomb explosions, he accidentally brings back a reality where he became Magus. As a result, there is a darkness that dwells within Warlock, and whenever he uses too much of his power, he risks releasing it. So in an attempt to keep Magus at bay, he is often forced to hold back at the risk of turning evil. Number 1. Dr. Manhattan. A hero who is referred to as a god in DC, Dr. Manhattan's powers grant him omnipotence. Because he carries so much power and also knowledge of all things past, present, and possible futures, he often does not take action. In fact, in the events of the Doomsday Clock, he even refers to himself as a man of inaction. He quarantined himself to Mars and typically does not use his powers to their full capabilities. If you don't believe me, just look at the New 52, which exists because of Dr. Manhattan's interference in the Flashpoint event. I mean, if Dr. Manhattan did not hold back his superpowers as often as he does, we'd probably be seeing a lot more DC reboots than we do.
Number 10. Infinite Mass Punch. Faster an object is moving, the greater its mass becomes. That's a law of physics. So, for example, a bullet won't do much to you if I just threw it at you. But once that sucker is launched out a barrel going almost 400 miles per hour, it can do quite a bit of damage. Now, in physics, once an object reaches light speed, it theoretically hits infinite mass. A select number of speedsters in DC Comics like Barry Allen and Wally West can use the Speed Force to travel at, and in some cases even beyond, the speed of light. So if we take the example of the bullet and replace it with like a speedster's fist who is moving at light speed, we get the infinite mass punch. Now in the world of DC Comics, where we can ignore whatever we want to ignore about physics because there is the magical Speed Force, this punch could absolutely devastate practically any opponent. The mass and therefore the energy of the punch is infinite, so there's literally nothing that could stop it, I guess unless that thing also had infinite mass. In the real world, we don't actually know for sure what would happen, but theoretically, Flash would actually create a singularity or a black hole and destroy us all. Now I'm very clearly not a physicist, just the guy who did some quick reading online, but if you can expand on this in the comments, feel free to. Number 9. Superman Supernova / Solar Flare. Since the 40s, Superman has regularly discovered new powers. One of those powers that we rarely ever see is his supernova, or his solar flare ability, where Superman releases all the solar energy he has stored in a massive blast. One example of this concept is in the Superman All-Star series by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. In this story, Superman is exposed to an excessive amount of solar radiation, which greatly amplifies his powers, but also causes his cells to break down. As a result, Superman's body essentially becomes a living solar battery with the capacity to release an immense amount of energy in a supernova-like explosion. In the storyline, Superman sacrifices himself by flying into the sun and using his energy to reignite it, saving the Earth. In the New 52 version of Superman, which is a reboot of the DC Comics universe that started in 2011, Superman gains a new power called the Super Flare, or Solar Flare. While this ability is not exactly the same as going supernova, it does involve the release of a massive amount of energy. The Super Flare power was first introduced in Superman 38, 38. When Superman uses this ability, he expels all the solar energy stored in his cells, creating a powerful and destructive energy blast that radiates out from his body. The blast is strong enough to level a large area and incinerate virtually anything in its path. However, using this power comes at a cost. After releasing the super flare, Superman's cells are depleted of solar energy, rendering him essentially just regular old human and powerless for about 24 hours until his cells can recharge by absorbing sunlight again. Number 8, Captain Atom. In the New 52, Captain Atom's powers are like an atomic party that just never stops. His atoms are constantly splitting and reforming, giving him an infinite amount of power, which could allow him to do basically anything. But he has used it to transmute lava into snow with just a thought, take on not one, not two, but 3 alternate Supermen and make it look like a walk in the park, and fire energy blasts with no apparent limit. Captain Atom's only real kryptonite, or Atomnite, is a little thing called coherence loss. Basically, if Atom uses too much power too fast, his atoms start partying a little bit too hard and will lose their groove. But even this limitation is something he is expected to eventually overcome given time and growth for his powers. So with all this power, how are there any villains left in the world? How has he not solved all of our problems? Basically, because at his core, he is still human. Some think that Captain Atom might actually be holding back in order to keep his human side intact, instead of becoming a heartless atomic entity, kind of like Dr. Manhattan. Number 7, Dr. Fate. One of the first magic-wielding superheroes ever, Dr. Fate debuted in 1940, way before Doctor Strange. Now, technically, Dr. Fate is a name used by the wearers of the Helmet of Fate, which was created by the powerful sorcerer Nabu, along with the Amulet of Anubis and the Cloak of Destiny. When Nabu passed, his spirit was absorbed into these items, allowing him to live on through his hosts. While Kent Nelson was the first one, characters like Inza Kramer, Jared Stevens, Khalid Nassour, and a few others have wielded the power of Dr. Fate throughout history, inhabiting the Tower of Fate and fighting magical threats. The Helmet of Fate grants the hero their vast magical powers, which include reality manipulation, matter manipulation, and time traveling, among many other abilities, plus the knowledge to cast spells that can do even more. The downside is that there is also the presence of Nabu, who gives them their power, and he doesn't always make the best choices. It has happened many times where the ones wearing the Helmet of Fate have had to actually intervene to hold back Nabu from doing something absolutely catastrophic, and it's in this way that Dr. Fate holds back.
At number 6, Blob might not strike you as a big deal, but he's kind of a big deal. This guy is basically an unstoppable force. He can basically decide, hey, I'm not moving from this spot, and bam, nothing can budge him. Plus, he's nearly indestructible and has muscles that could give the Hulk a run for his money. The thing is, Blob's not exactly the brainiac of the group. He hangs out with the Brotherhood of Mutants, but he's always in the background, just being the strong guy. He's got the potential to be a star of the show, though. He can take down entire teams of his own, but instead, he's always just playing second fiddle to the main bad guy. Now, what's more intriguing is how Blob becomes immovable and what he can do with that power. But sadly, it's never really explored to its fullest potential. Blob's holding back some serious power, and that's a shame because he's not making the most of it. At number 5 is Proxima Midnight, part of Thanos' squad, the Black Order, is a serious powerhouse in the comics. In Infinity War, she didn't quite get the spotlight that she deserved. Her spear might not have a fancy name like the Infinity Gauntlet, but it's crazy strong. Thanos made the spear by trapping a star in a special space rocket, making it a star, a black hole, and a supernova all at once. When she throws her spear, it splits into 3 black light tracers, making it impossible to miss. It's not just for throwing though, it can zap victims into cosmic nets powered by an entire star. But in the movies, she's kind of toned down. Like in the comics, she's tough, like fighting Luke Cage tough. She even took on Thor at one point. She can handle a beating too, from energy blasts from Captain Marvel, Thor's lightning, even hits from Mjolnir. She's wrecked entire teams, beaten the Hulk, and wrecked multiverses with her power. Proxima Midnight is a heavyweight in Marvel, no joke. At number 4, Omega Red burst onto the Marvel scene like a firework. He was a Soviet mutant soldier with crazy powers, unaliving spores and tentacles made of carbonadium. Now his first showdown against Wolverine and the whole blue team was insane, as he absolutely obliterated him, proving how tough he was. But then in the twist, after that epic debut, he kind of lost his mojo. Instead of battling teams, he got stuck duking it out with just Wolverine, and he kept losing. Kinda hard to believe considering he took out Wolverine and his entire team the first time. This powerhouse took on a whole team by himself, but ended up getting beaten by one guy, a short, grumpy Canadian, no less. It's almost as if he hit his peak too soon. Omega Red went from being this big, scary villain to just another baddie who couldn't handle a solo fight. At number 3 is the Anti-Monitor. Big bad in DC Comics, this was a serious powerhouse. His main gig was wrecking the universe with his antimatter wave, at things like a wrecking ball smashing through buildings. He was way stronger than those super strong Kryptonians before the Crisis stuff went down, and his age gave him skills that nobody could match. The dude almost wiped out everything, but the heroes pulled a Hail Mary to stop him. But here's the thing, after he went full berserk and destroyed a couple of Earths, he suddenly put the brakes on that antimatter wave move. Instead, he started going for these overly complicated plans to undo his universe with demolition. In later gigs, he ditched using that crazy strong power altogether. It's almost as if he got tired of using a universe wrecker and wanted to be more of a schemer. At number 2 is the Shadow King. This guy's a big deal in the X-Men world, but when it comes to it, he's kind of like a balloon without air. He talks big game all the time, wanting control of everybody on Earth, but when push comes to shove, he always falls short. It's like when you're all set to play a video game, but your controller's out of batteries. Kind of frustrating and a letdown. He's this astral plane dude, so you'd think he'd have some serious cosmic power, but nah, he just keeps going after the toughest telepaths in X-Men instead of picking off the easiest targets. Almost as if he's choosing to play on hard mode when he can switch to easy and actually win for once. Honestly, it's a bit of a disappointment in the villain department. For someone with such grand plans, he ends up being more of a comic relief than a serious threat. At number 1 is Perpetua, the big baddie in DC Comics, with some serious powers. We're talking about making entire multiverses. Like many universes all at once. She's like the top dog in creating all these different worlds, but here's the kicker, even though she's had this mind-blowing ability, she just never really lets loose with it. Imagine this, the Justice League with all of their powers combined couldn't even stop her. She's that strong. But when she's got all her strength back and took over almost everything, she still didn't go all out with her mega creation powers. And that's why she got taken down by the Batman who laughs. The regular Batman who's a little loco. Kind of weird, right? I mean, if you got the ability to make entire universes, why are you holding back? Maybe she just thought ruling one multiverse was enough, or maybe she just didn't want to deal with all the consequences. But it's a classic case of a super powerful villain not using their full potential.